Apocalypse. I can steal superpowers. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176, Self-Driving. Since its establishment, the Wolf Hunting Corps has had a total of 14,053 members, but now only these are left. Those who passed away were heroes, and I was able to reach this position because of my original talent. Von Kuss talked about this topic and laughed very complacently. For the sake of revenge, no one thought about living, but this great cause will be accomplished by him. He is an old farmer, but he has spent more than 2 years to get to this point. This shows that he is not an ordinary person. In ancient times, he would definitely be remembered in history. If it succeeds today, then the hundreds of thousands of souls under the command of Werewolf Sapien can finally rest in peace. Von Kuss took a big gulp of wine, and his cheeks became even redder. Werewolf Sapien will definitely die here this time. GLUO's expression was very serious, as if he was about to make a vow. Von Kuss smiled and nodded without correcting the meaning of GLUO's words. Werewolf Sapien will definitely die today, but he may not be killed by them. Since the Security Bureau knows all this, it is impossible that they don't have a backup plan. Then, to death. The middle-aged man knocked on his chest with his hand and handed the wine jug to GLUO. His eyes sparkled in the flames. GLUO was stared at by him, took a deep breath, took the wine jug, and then raised his head and took a sip, as if the touch of the blade in the fire extended from the tip of the tongue to the throat, and then GLUO's gastric tube and lung cavity also made a sound of pain. Cough 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 cough. GLUO, who tasted such a strong liquor for the first time, was choked and coughed violently. Von Kuss laughed, took the wine jug handed back from GLUO, and took another sip himself. Hahaha cool. The so-called strong liquor tastes like swords and wind and frost. GLUO's face flushed red, and he trembled with every breath. His throat seemed to be on fire, but after the taste of the flames, a warm airflow spread throughout his body, and the whole person seemed to be soaked in the scorching sun, and his whole body was bright and refreshing. Your wine seems to be a little special. Of course, this wine is a very extraordinary thing, but I won't tell you in case you are scared. Von Kuss raised his eyebrows very naggingly. Although GLUO was puzzled, he wisely did not ask. Anyway, it's all in the stomach. Don't torture yourself. GLUO, I like your prediction just now, but this time, I hope you just watch, and don't interfere, just watch. GLUO raised his head in confusion. At this time, there was no haze in Von Kuss's expression. Unlike the previous refusal to interfere, the middle-aged man now looked at GLUO with expectation. Child, everyone has their own destiny, and some people's destiny should stay here. But you can't die here. This is not where you belong. GLUO, you have to remember that people can do their best, but they can't give everything for others. After all, we are just your passers-by. A selfless person can't give others even a little selflessness. Giving and getting are equal exchanges. The so-called selflessness is to get inner satisfaction by giving without asking for anything in return. The smile on Von Kuss's face became more and more intense. He reached out and picked up the long sword beside him. The sword was pulled out of the scabbard, and the cold light flashed. But it is precisely because of this that this kind of person is the most selfish. He can't see his friends, his relatives, his lovers, those who love him deeply, worrying about him day and night and silently giving. On your own. GLUO looked at the words printed on the long sword in Von Kuss's hand and understood what he meant. Von Kuss's sword is called on your own, which comes from the words he just said. That's right, everyone has to do it on their own in the end. If you see life and death many times, you will get used to it. In this world, no one can escape life and death. We are just one step ahead. Von Kuss sheathed the sword and put it back at his side. He looked into the distance, took another sip of liquor, and the smile on his face was as free and easy as the wind blowing in the dark night. Thank you for your advice. GLUO knew that his mentality was still at the level of an ordinary person. It didn't matter if he hid before, but now that he had stepped into the world of evolvers, he had to change. Unlike the harmony of ordinary people, there were too many swords and swords, life and death fights among evolvers. To show mercy to others was to be cruel to oneself. The setting sun passed, and the moonlight arrived as promised. The quiet stars dotted the zenith of the suburbs. The creatures facing the sun began to fall into a deep sleep. The waning moon hung high in the sky, and under the shining silver light, its followers finally let out the first long howl. The sound was clear and long, and it came from far away with the cold winter wind. At that moment, the whole camp suddenly fell into silence, as if an extreme cold current swept across, and all active humans were frozen, and a suffocating atmosphere spread. The cold wind blew, and only Von Cass looked normal. He stood up, and shouted his orders loudly. "Everyone, take your positions as planned. Bazookas and grenade launchers are concentrated in the center of the camp, and they will be deployed for support." As if a burning flame had descended, all the frozen humans suddenly woke up. Noisy, urgent, and fierce. Fear flowed through everyone's body, as if the blood had been frozen into ice slurry. In order to survive, people pulled out their weapons. Swords and guns were clenched in trembling palms. The fire was lit, the dim light held up a warm umbrella, and worried eyes looked forward. Noisy whispers came from the dark forest. The sounds of wolf howling and running became increasingly complex, and the sound of the fur rubbing against the branches and leaves became louder and louder, reminiscent of the sound heard when an ant colony moves forward after the sound is amplified. GLUO followed Von Cass's advice and quietly became a bystander. The grievances between the werewolf sapien and the wolf hunting group involved the deaths of tens of thousands of people. This was not something he could intervene in unilaterally. It is important for people to know themselves, and guests should follow the host's wishes. The wolves controlled by humans, with their ferocity and wisdom, are a huge threat. Knowing that humans have guns, the wolves deliberately chose the dark night, and lowered their bodies one by one, moving forward in a zigzag shape. What's more troublesome is that the distance between each wolf is very wide. They attack the camp from all directions. The vanguard is actually an ordinary wolf pack, used as cannon fodder to explore the way. Of course, the human side did not bury mines. Although GLUO is an evolver, he never thought how terrifying an evolver can be on the battlefield. Ordinary bullets can't kill them, but anti-material sniper rifles can do it. If that doesn't work, there are howitzers and rockets. Simple humans always have ways to restrain them. Chapter 177, Wolves. However, looking at the scene in front of him, GLUO's thoughts were a little shaken. The werewolf sapien was the only one, and he was seriously injured. But at this time, the number of wolves under his control exceeded 300. No one knew where he got so many wolves from. GLUO even suspected whether the werewolf sapien could transform dogs into ferocious wolves. One wolf looked particularly like a husky. Although these wolves, that had been simply transformed, were ordinary wolves in the mouth of Von Cass, their body length was comparable to that of an adult, and their shoulder height exceeded that of a person's knee. The night was originally the home ground of wolves. With the command of the mastermind behind the scenes, the gunfire in the hands of humans never stopped, but they could not stop the wolves from approaching. This is too outrageous. GLUO felt that these were not wolves at all. They were even more military than soldiers. They kept a distance from each other, moved forward in coordination, and took a zigzag route. They never stayed in one position for more than 1.5 seconds. The camp was still a bit large after all. More than 150 members of the wolf hunting group were scattered on all sides for defense, which was not enough to form a continuous firepower coverage. Although wolves died screaming every moment, they had already begun to approach the camp. Grenade. Seeing the approach of the wolves, Von Cass ordered everyone to throw explosives without hesitation. Boom. 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 The sound of the grenade explosion was like a huge firework. The flames and impact of the explosion were enough to kill the wolves within a diameter of 10 meters. For a while, the approaching wolves died one after another. The smell of burning came from afar, and it smelled a little meaty. However, the situation was not so good for humans. The distance between the wolves was still too far. They or the werewolf sapien had fought with humans too many times, and he knew humans too well. Everything was like a step-by-step drill. Although nearly half of the scattered wolves died in more than 10 minutes, the other half had already begun to approach humans. Once the wolves get close, Considering the problem of accidental injuries, high-powered weapons such as rocket launchers and grenade launchers cannot be used, and even the use of firearms may be limited. The worst situation soon happened. The defense line on the east side of the human camp was close to the forest, so it was difficult to use firearms. The wolves finally succeeded in getting close. Roar. The manic roar sounded, and the wolves rushed out of the dark woods. The grey-white fur was continuous under the light, as if grey-white waves were constantly surging. The fluorescent wolf pupils flashed with bloodthirsty light, and the white fangs were naturally exposed as the wolf kissed. 4 claws ran wildly and suddenly jumped up. Ding. Minimum Yashu, holding a sniper rifle, emptied the last bullet in the magazine and directly beat a giant wolf that was approaching into pieces. Minimum Yashu, who had just inherited the weapon from his dead friend, used it very skillfully. While waiting for the barrel to cool down, he changed the magazine. Soon, a dull thud sounded from the metal barrel, the bullet flew out of the muzzle, and a handful of burning flames lit up again. At this moment, if you zoom in, you can see that the wolves around the circular camp are moving faster. Their eyes have turned blood red, and they have no fear of death at all, just running forward. On the camp's defense line, the first wolf that approached jumped high, its cheeks were thin, its fangs were open, and it seemed eager to taste flesh and blood. Unfortunately, a huge bullet hit its nose, the impact shattered its nasal bone, and the blood mist exploded. Then the steel bullet continued to move forward, tearing its bones and flesh apart, and its internal organs were also crushed into mud under the shock. The dead wolf fell from mid-air, looking like a flag that was waved down. After that, the grey-white wave continued to move forward, and the weapons in the hands of humans began to sound one after another. Roar. The ferocious wolf wanted to jump onto the low wall, but it was over its limit, and crashed into it. The wolf fell to the ground. Before it could get up, a bullet went through its eye socket, and its brain was shredded, turning it into a corpse. The sound of gunfire continued, and the bullets bursting out of the gun barrel hit the continuous white waves. The screams and whimpers of the wolf pack rang out everywhere, and blood gushed out. The shot wolf fell to the ground, and its kind stepped on it, but it continued to move forward. Occasionally, a wolf with its limbs broken by a bullet fell to the ground, and was trampled on by its kind and wailed. But more wolves, after being shot, would continue to move forward, as long as they were not dead. The injured beasts were more ferocious, as if they wanted to tear off a piece of human flesh before they died, but most of them failed. In the first few waves of contact, no human was injured or killed, and nearly 200 wolves fell to the ground, but the wolf pack was still surging. Obviously, the werewolf sapien had added chips. Now, GLUO was sure that the werewolf sapien was definitely made of dogs. These leading wolves were just test subjects. The evil wolves behind them were terrifyingly large. Gunshots came one after another, and the explosions of grenades continued. Finally, the first wolf crossed the low wall, but it was shot dead by humans. However, the wolf howls did not stop, and the wolves continued to charge. One after another, the evil wolves began to jump onto the defense line. The humans holding shields and long swords stood in front, and the broad-backed long sword swung up and knocked them down, while slitting the throats of the evil wolves. The smelly wolf blood spurted out, and a dying hungry wolf suddenly bit the slashing hand. Its body fell, pulling the human's body out of the shield. Another evil wolf pounced and bit the human's neck. The human screamed, and his companions shot and killed the evil wolf, but the human who had lost a lot of blood gradually lost his voice. After a stalemate of nearly 20 minutes, finally, the human side began to suffer casualties. Although the number of dead humans was insignificant compared to that of the wolves, everyone knew that the situation was not good. The wolves put too much pressure on the humans. This kind of high-intensity battle was too exhausting, and the humans could not hold on for too long. This was indeed the case. As the human magazines were empty, and they began to change magazines, the fierce waves showed their hideousness. The defenders screamed one after another. Some humans were even dragged out of the defense circle. The humans who fell into the waves were torn to pieces in an instant, and died with their shrill screams. In the chaos, the humans' physical strength began to be consumed in large quantities, the guns began to lose accuracy, and the power of the swords gradually weakened. Someone chopped down with a sword, but failed to hit the wolf's fatal point. The ferocious wolf pounced on him, threw him to the ground, and tore him to death. The lighting seemed to have become a burning wall, and the shrill screams and the wails of the wolves rang out everywhere. The so-called fight is that both sides bleed together until one side bleeds out. Chapter 178, Nightfire. The bloody fight was in full swing, with more than 300 giant wolves falling to the ground, and dozens of humans also died. As the momentum was overwhelmed, the casualties became more and more serious. Abandon the first line of defense. Light up the entire line of defense. Everyone retreat. Von Kuss held a long sword in one hand and a gun in the other. His body was stained with wolf blood, and even his face was stained with a lot of blood, but he was not injured, and his breathing was still calm, obviously retaining his fighting power. Gielluo and Kichudi were already standing far away at this time, and Gielluo did not think of rushing over to join them. After all, he didn't even have a weapon, let alone a gun. If he went over, he might not only not help, but also cause trouble. Kichudi, National Security Bureau 19. Are you just going to watch? This is their choice. We will naturally give them face. Of course, if they die, at least our people won't have to die. Gielluo, you have to know that not everyone can bring weapons into our country. Kichudi is only 22 years old this year, but her temperament is indifferent, crawling out of a sea of corpses and bones. Kichudi doesn't know how many people she has killed. She really doesn't care about life or death, not at all. All this was originally a deal. They just fought for revenge. Now you see their death, but you don't know how many people died in vain because of their revenge. If it weren't for this, how could I be here? So, everything is destined. Gielluo is no longer a child. He may feel a little reluctant in his heart, but he won't do anything unnecessary. Kichudi brought him here to see the world of the evolvers, and he just needs to watch. At this moment, under Von Kuss's command, the entire defense line began to ignite. The flames were like a long snake, and the wolf pack's attack was blocked for a moment. The humans began to retreat. Those with empty magazines replaced them, and those whose arms were sore from swinging swords did simple recovery. Standing next to the second line of defense, Von Kuss turned his head and looked back. Everything was fine at the westernmost line of defense. Apparently, after the wolves discovered the breakthrough point in the forest, they began to attack the eastern line of defense frantically. The western side of the camp was very easy. As expected, Von Kuss wiped the blood off his face with his sleeve. The firelight flickered in his pupils, like bright and tangled lines. The middle-aged man seemed to be waiting for something. A smile suddenly appeared on his face, and that smile was a little excited and cruel. In the dark night, the wolves rushed over. At this time, the wolves did not look like predators in the grassland, but rather like a disciplined and fierce army. Screams and blood, accompanied by death and pain, erupted in the second line of human defense, like a levee hit by a rainstorm. The manic water flow washed every piece of land, intending to break through the accumulation of soil and rocks, and completely submerge the village under the river. Sapin, if this is all you can do, then today, you are dead. Von Kuss suddenly turned over the line of defense, and seemed to be defenseless. Several giant wolves like cats rushed over, but died under his gunfire and sword. More than 10 meters away, a snow-white wolf did not attack the human defense line. It hid in a ruin, seemingly observing humans. Sapin, don't pretend. You installed a camera device in the body of some wolves, you know what I mean. Von Kuss looked a little aggressive at this time, but his fearlessness made the people on the opposite side hesitate. But when Von Kuss got close enough, the white wolf couldn't help it after all. It bared its fangs and quickly approached Von Kuss in an arc. The white wolf stared at Von Kuss' neck, as if aiming at the position where it would kill him with one strike. The sound of the long sword colliding with the pistol was quite crisp. Von Kuss stepped heavily and began to run at full speed, while the white wolf also let out a creepy growl and charged towards Von Kuss. The extremely hungry prairie wolf suddenly jumped up just before approaching Von Kuss. It pounced straight at Von Kuss, intending to knock the human down and then bite open his throat. Von Kuss did not retreat either. He rushed forward towards the white wolf and slashed with the sword. When it leaped towards him, Von Kuss's sword blade directly cut open the white wolf's lower abdomen, but in the next second, he felt a huge force coming. Plop. Von Kuss was thrown to the ground with a thud. People in the distance screamed, but Von Kuss didn't care. The smelly wolf blood covered his body, but the white wolf on Vonkus was not dead. Its fangs were extremely open, twisting and trying to bite Vonkus's neck. Of course, it couldn't succeed. I gave you a chance, but you are useless. Vonkus threw the long sword to his side and grabbed the head of the white wolf with both hands. Crack. Vonkus's terrible power directly twisted the white wolf's neck. After a crisp sound, the head of the prairie wolf on Vonkus's body had turned to an impossible degree. Sapien. Don't try. You can't kill me like this. Gluo pushed the body of the prairie wolf away and climbed up from the ground. He was covered with a lot of wolf blood and looked like a half-blooded man. At this time, the giant wolves around did not dare to rush towards Vonkus, but stopped where they were and did not move. Obviously, Werewolf Sapien also knew that these enhanced mutant wolves had no chance of winning against a Black Iron level 2nd evolver. It seems we can't delay any longer. Vonkus walked back to the front line with a long sword in one hand and a pistol in the other. His behavior just now seemed reckless, but it was actually a test, and the result of the test was also obvious. Werewolf Sapien was stalling for time. He was planning something. No matter what the other party did, since the other party wanted to wait, they must not wait. Retreat to the third front line. Prepare to set the forest on fire. Vonkus used human lives as bait to let the wolves get close enough. Now, the eastern defense line is full of wolf shadows, and the plan arranged by Vonkus is also unfolding as planned. Ignite the forest. Ignite the forest. Ignite the forest. East, the shouts of humans spread, the howling of wolves formed a wall, countless torches were thrown far away, and the forest only 30 or 40 meters away from the third defense line was suddenly ignited. The flames were like rising claws, and began to climb from the bottom of the trees to the top of the trees step by step. The continuous woods burned rapidly under the huge mouth-like flames, and the combustion supporting materials arranged by humans in advance became the best fuse. Just a moment later, the entire forest surrounding the camp turned into a sea of fire. Without rain, this will be a forest fire. Gluo looked at the entire forest that burned into a wall of fire and finally understood why Kichudi was so indifferent to the wolf hunting group. This group of people really did everything they could to get revenge. Chapter 179, Explosion. Don't worry, we have prepared a quarantine zone. There is no other way, it's just for survival. Let's go. To the west. Fenkas had already withdrawn from the front line at this time. He looked quite relaxed and even had time to chat with Gluo. Before leaving, Fenkas took a last look at the burning forest in the east and made a gesture of invitation to Kichudi. The three of them stood side by side and began to walk towards the dimly lit west. Under Fenkas's backing, the forest fire in the east of the camp had spread completely. The fierce waves turned into whimpers and howls in the flames. I don't know how many wolves were burned in the forest. The cries of countless wolves were sharp and urgent, as if ghosts were wailing. On the third line of defense built by humans, the remaining wolves were all turned into corpses. The fire that ignited the forest became the best barrier. No wolf could break through this wall again. The wolf corpses in front of the human front line were spread like a carpet, and the bloody smell filled the sky. The wolves howled continuously. The wolves that were ready to attack the human defense line were burned to ashes in the fire. Because the defense pressure was not great, Vonkus only left a dozen people here symbolically. The rest of the people all withdrew from the front line and rushed to the west. No one expected that the situation would be guessed so accurately by Vonkus. When the team arrived at the western defense line, there was no pressure at first, but just when most people relaxed, the wolves went crazy. A giant wolf bit a middle-aged man's left leg regardless of life and death. The bitten middle-aged man raised his hand and stabbed him hard. The blood spilled by the giant wolf dyed his forehead, but before the middle-aged man could draw his knife again, another wolf bit his right leg. Then, the two wolves worked together to drag him out of the defense line. Several sinister fangs pounced on him and tore the middle-aged man into pieces in the blood. Ding, ding, ding. The people holding guns were shot continuously. The light of gunpowder explosions kept flickering around. The wolves attacked like crazy. They were fighting with injuries for injuries, life for life. The human defense line that was not prepared was thinning at a speed visible to the eyes. Blood and shrill howling became almost everything they saw. Use grenades and rockets alternately. Stop them. Von Kuss always stood at the forefront of the needle and thread, and everyone just looked at him and had the courage to persevere. Soon, the heavy firepower on standby came. The flames and explosions lit up the night like day. The wolves' desperate counterattack was suppressed, and even the wolves began to retreat, apparently preparing to escape. Everyone thought that they had achieved a staged victory, but before they could cheer, the werewolf Sapien, who had forced the human to reveal his trump card, finally revealed his trump card. So, the horrible nightmare of mankind came. It was a black wolf, transformed by the wolfman Sapien himself. Each black wolf could rival the bronze level I evolvers. It emerged from the shadows. In the first instant, the human beings suffered heavy casualties. At the same time, as if announcing something, a long wolf howl came, and the wolf pack's attack became more fierce. The remaining humans fell one after another. Von Kuss no longer hesitated, and went into the wolf pack alone, swinging his sword wildly. Von Kuss's martial arts skills were not good, but he was very strong. Moreover, as an evolver of the Black Iron level 2nd, these black wolves crushed ordinary people, but it was not difficult for him to kill them. But the problem was, there were too many black wolves. Detonate the bomb. Von Kuss kicked the black wolf beside him away, turned over and returned to the defense line. Without any hesitation, the person holding the detonator decisively pressed the button. Then, the world began to tremble, and the entire arc-shaped front line turned into hell. No one expected that Von Kuss would bury all the bombs on the western front and deliberately reduce the number of defenders here, to create the illusion that they could give up at any time. What was even more frightening was that Von Kuss placed the bombs so close that some people were even within the range of the explosion and died directly. If you want to hurt others, you must hurt yourself. Von Kuss used the strategy of exchanging injuries for injuries and lives for lives to successfully destroy the werewolf Sapien's trump card. But at the same time, humans also suffered heavy casualties. Even those who did not die were mostly seriously injured and lay on the ground dying. Ayo. A long wolf howl suddenly came, and the remaining wolves suddenly stopped, and the black beasts began to retreat, away from the scorched earth front. Under the bright moonlight, the wolf pack like a black forest separated from it, and a road appeared from it. In the silence, a huge silver wolf like a rhinoceros walked leisurely from far to near. Its fur was pure silver, and its eyes flashed with a glowing light. The blue source of wind attributes surrounded it, and the smoke like rapids seemed to be escaping and flowing from its fur. Von Kuss, I'm coming. The silver wolf walked to the front of the human line as if strolling. It moved its wolf kiss, and the sound it made was actually human language. Werewolf Sapien, you can really become a wolf. Von Kuss had guessed this before. If Sapien could not become a wolf, he would never have escaped the last time he was killed. It's just a shallow application. Do you need to make a fuss? Really not. Werewolf Sapien, it's time to end everything. Von Kuss nodded, with a smile soaked in memories on his face. He picked up the wine pot at his waist and drank a big gulp. Then, the middle-aged man turned around and handed the wine pot to Gluo. I'll give it to you. Gluo looked up at Von Kuss, hesitated for a moment, and still reached out to take the wine pot. You don't understand, Werewolf Sapien. Don't understand 3 blue steel level evolver. So, you all think too simply. Von Kuss took out a cigarette, bent down and blocked the wind with his hands, lit the cigarette, and started to walk out with the cigarette in his mouth. Mr. Von Kuss. Uncle Feng. Lord Von Kuss. Everyone looked at Von Kuss's progress in surprise. Some impatient people had already shouted loudly, but Gluo was the only one who said nothing. He looked at the wine pot in his hand and slowly closed his eyes. Thank you all for the past 2 years. After everything is over tonight, remember to have a good meal, and then go back to your own homes, and find your own mothers. The road is long, so be well. Von Kuss did not give anyone an answer. The green source power surged on his body. In a few leaps, he completely left the defense circle of the camp. The wind was howling, and Von Kuss casually threw away the gun in his hand, suddenly drew the long sword at his waist, and walked towards the giant wolf step by step. At this time, the silver-white giant wolf slightly raised its claws, and the black wolves, less than 20 in number, began to retreat, giving up the battlefield that they could not participate in. Chapter 180, Above Humanity. Vonkus, I'm really surprised that you've reached the blue steel level. I have to say that old man has a good eye. You are really a genius. The huge silver wolf shook its head as if warming up. It had never thought that Vonkus would achieve a breakthrough after being on the verge of death last time. The two people who were both at the blue steel level had already used the ability to release their source power, and they also used wind attributed source power at the same time. The collision between these two people here was like fate. The werewolf sapient slowly bared his teeth, staring at Vonkus's arrival with his fluorescent eyes, and slowly lowered his body. The middle-aged man holding a cigarette kept walking, and the cyan source power quickly flowed through his body. The smoky source power had no substance, but it flowed and danced like smoke. The storm source power flowed through Vonkus' body, and the speed was getting faster and faster. The ultimate hatred. Vonkus whispered the name of his original talent. He was still stepping forward, but with every step he took, the source power on his body became stronger. The originally black pupils slowly turned cyan, blood overflowed from the corners of his mouth, and his hair turned grey in an instant. Old and strong, decayed and majestic, two completely different situations happened to Vonkus. At this moment, he seemed to have ignited everything he had, and burst out with all he had. In the distance, the silver wolf lowered his body, and also felt the danger from Vonkus. Therefore, the werewolf sapien chose to take the initiative to attack. It was a pounce, or it could be said to be a sprint. Surrounded by the wind attribute source power, the silver wolf's huge body burst out with a speed that was completely contrary to it. The sharp wind suddenly swept up, and the creature that caused the wind rushed towards Vonkus. The moonlight was hanging down, and it seemed that there was a glow flowing on the silver wolf's fur. The middle-aged man walked forward with a sword, spitting out smoke from his mouth, and his eyes suddenly narrowed at this moment. Roar. With a howl, the silver wolf's front paws pounced down, and its canine teeth intertwined in front of Vonkus. But Vonkus stood there in a daze, and the only movement was to raise the long sword upwards. The cyan source power fell like a cannonball under the control of the silver wolf. Vonkus turned around suddenly. Under the impetus of the storm source power, his figure was so fast that it seemed to blur in an instant. The middle-aged man's body almost dodged the silver wolf's pounce. Then, the body of the wild wolf hit the ground, and the strong wind blew past, pushing Vonkus' body outwards. But at this moment, the long sword in Vonkus' hand stabbed out in the air, and inevitably hit the left eye of the silver wolf. The sparks on the cigarette butt were blown away by the wind, and Vonkus stepped on the silver wolf with both feet, and fled far away, avoiding the wild wolf's frantic claws. Roar. The silver wolf stood up, closed its left eye, and red blood flowed down its fur. Its only remaining eye stared at Vonkus, and its teeth bared angrily. Werewolf sapien, you underestimated me too much. I will die here today, and you can't go there. Vonkus spit out the cigarette, but in his mouth, and more blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. He raised his hand to wipe the blood and slowly raised the long sword in his hand. Vonkus, how long can you last in this state? When you burn out, that's when you die. The werewolf sapien thought that Vonkus would fight him head on, but he didn't expect that Vonkus, in his last moments before death, could actually dodge his attack, break through his source defense with a sword, and blind his eyes. Of course, the werewolf sapien would not fail like this. What awaits Vonkus will be his most violent and terrifying posture. Vonkus, I admit that you are the only person who has the possibility of killing me in all these years. But, it's just a possibility. For me, that's enough. The middle-aged man, who was not very strong, stood horizontally with a sword, and the tall silver wolf, like a bull, stood a little further away from him. The silver wolf bared its fangs ferociously. Its left eye was blind, and the bright red blood flowed down its snow-white fur. Its intact right eye stared at the human who hurt it. It didn't roar or get angry, but instead looked at him without any emotion. The night wind blew, and a bone-chilling chill filled everyone's heart. Minimum Yashu looked at the walking posture of Fenkas in the distance, and suddenly covered his face. Everyone on the entire defense line was silent, as if all hope and guilt were pressed on this silence. No one fired to help Fenkas, and they didn't even have the courage to shout for encouragement. All emotions turned into the most silent gaze. Perhaps this is the unique emotion of ordinary people when looking up at the evolvers, or it can be said that humans timidly stop before their lives are in danger. In front of the silver wolf, the bodies of humans and prairie wolves were scattered all over the ground, and the smell of blood spread dyed the grass red. Further back, more than 20 black wolves crouched on the ground. When the master was fighting, none of them came forward, but just lay on the ground in submission. They dared not have any thoughts about the flesh and blood in front of them. Even some black wolves were seriously injured, but they dared not even groan. They just bled to death. Humans and wolves seemed to be paying attention to their own masters and started fighting. No one dared to disturb them. Once one side crossed the edge, it was likely that the most unscrupulous and chaotic fight would follow. Humans did not dare to move for their own lives, and the wolves did not launch an attack. In the end, both could only wait in silence, waiting for the victory of the leader and the end of the battle. Gluo stood in front of the crowd. He picked up the wine backhanded to him by Vonkus, and drank a sip. The touch of the blade in the fire extended from the tip of the tongue to the throat. The stomach tube and the lung cavity also made a sound of pain. Gluo was choked and coughed violently. Every breath made his whole body tremble, and his entire throat seemed to be on fire. But under this touch, Gluo felt a sense of relaxation, as if his soul was relieved from the pain. After the taste of the flames, the warm airflow spread all over his body, and the whole person seemed to be soaked in the scorching sun. On the other side, in front of the various forms of all living beings, the battle between Vonkus and Silver Wolf finally broke out. From static to dynamic, the picture was like ripples on the lake. After the ripples spread, everything was different. Vonkus lowered his head, threw away his long sword, and Silver Wolf raised his head and rushed forward to face Vonkus. The man and the wolf collided with a bang. The source power of the two seemed to turn into a roaring hurricane, and the collisions caused by the repulsive force began to intersect fiercely again and again. As a human, Vonkus is more sensitive than Silver Wolf, but this human wolf sapien is also cunning. It approaches Vonkus again and again, and even exchanges injuries for injuries, forcing Vonkus to fight him. The science source power is scattered, like flying catkins and fallen leaves, and the smoky storm source power is constantly consumed in the collision. Chapter 181, Old Feud. Before the Silver Wolf could attack, Vonkus turned around and stabbed at its right eye, but the Silver Wolf just lowered its head and collided head-on with the blade. The long sword cut a bloody wound on the Silver Wolf's head, but Vonkus was also close to it, and the long sword did not have time to withdraw. The Silver Wolf's claws had already hit Vonkus' body, and 4 narrow wounds opened on Vonkus' chest. His clothes were torn, and his flesh was turned upside down. Vonkus rolled on the ground. His panting body was like a bellows. The cyan in his eyes became heavier, and his hair had completely turned grey. Vonkus stood up again, holding the sword with both hands. The cyan source power swept up from his body, and the blood vessels all over Vonkus' body burst at once, making him look ferocious and terrifying. Finally, the werewolf sapien showed hesitation and fear in his eyes. This time, he did not pounce immediately, but Vonkus shouted and pounced on him. As if feeling provoked, the werewolf sapien roared for the first time since the start of the war, and rushed towards Vonkus without dodging. Boom. 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 In the frenzied battle, the man and the wolf seemed to have turned into two beasts biting each other, and Vonkus did not dodge the attack of the Silver Wolf. He relied on the huge source power that continued to overflow from his body to attack the Silver Wolf. His claws and swords kept bringing blood to each other's bodies, and roars and growls came from their throats. In just a moment, both the Silver Wolf and Vonkus were covered in wounds, but this desperate fight continued. Everyone could see clearly that Vonkus' appearance had obviously paid a price. He gave people the feeling that he was burning himself. The squeezing of his vitality also made Vonkus' source power become violent. Obviously, no matter what the result of this battle was, Vonkus would not be able to survive. At this time, everyone finally had enough understanding of the power of the 3 blue steel evolver. The speed of the pure Silver Wolf's full strength charge was just an illusion under the moonlight in the eyes of humans. Every attack was like a bomb exploding, and the grass and soil on the ground collapsed into a big pit, and the blue smoke was stained around it. Countless times, Vonkus' attacks were blocked by the visible repulsion. It can be said that, if the werewolf Sapien gave up fighting Vonkus, it would only need to rush forward to instantly tear apart the human defense line. All guns are just toys to it. The impact force generated by the gunpowder boost will be easily turned into nothingness by the source force, and the silver wolf's claws will definitely break the body into two if they hit ordinary people. Of course, even if Vonkus has the source force defense, facing the attack of the silver wolf, he is exhausted physically and mentally. The long sword was raised and swung sideways, leaving a bloody mark on the side cheek of the silver wolf, but at the same time, Vonkus's shoulder was also hit hard by the wolf's claws. Ha ha. With the power of the wolf's claws, Vonkus, who was injured again, rolled to the side and barely opened a distance between him and the silver wolf. The middle-aged man was panting, his hair was completely wet with sweat, and his body was covered with dense wounds. If Vonkus was not an evolver, or even if he had not completely burned himself and fought to the limit for revenge, he would have died long ago. But, even so, Vonkus also felt that he was running out of energy, and the coldness of death had begun to take away his body temperature. It's time to end. The middle-aged man took a deep breath and stood up. He turned his head and Kichudi was looking over. Vonkus nodded and suddenly smiled on his face. He seemed to be saying, "I'll leave the rest to you." Then, Vonkus stuck the long sword into the ground and faced the silver wolf with empty hands. Vonkus. In the distance, Gluo watched the middle-aged man put down his weapon, and his heart suddenly throbbed. He didn't understand what Vonkus wanted to do, but normally, when a person throws down his weapon, either he gives up the fight and surrenders, or he decides to die with the enemy. Werewolf Sapien, come on. Let's go to hell together. Vonkus, with a hideous face, concentrated all his source power on his right arm. The excessive science source power made his entire right arm bulge with veins, and his skin and flesh swelled up, looking as if it was about to explode. Vonkus clenched his right fist, bent his body, and rushed forward. Facing his charge, the pure silver wolf showed joy in its fluorescent eyes. It bent its body and bared its fangs. Captain Minimum Yashu, who had been holding the sniper rifle, was hoarse at this moment. He didn't know what Vonkus wanted to do, but he inexplicably understood that it would be difficult for Vonkus to survive after this attack. And at the same time that Minimum Yashu roared, a wave-like shock appeared on the entire defense line. No one could hold back the exclamation. After the exclamation, the atmosphere suddenly fell into a dead silence. Just in the previous moment, the silver wolf stood in place and waited for Vonkus to rush in front of him. The middle-aged man swung his right fist, but the silver wolf suddenly turned his head, his bloody mouth opened, and directly bit Vonkus's entire right arm in his mouth. After abandoning his weapon, Vonkus was like a tiger without claws and teeth. How could the silver wolf still be afraid of him? A human with bare hands would definitely be bitten to death. Source martial arts, ultimate death. Vonkus, whose entire right arm was bitten, suddenly laughed. The blood vessels on his face all popped out, and his face looked extremely ferocious. The blue storm source power spread on Vonkus's right arm. The repulsive force caused by the source power made the silver wolf unable to close its mouth, but its canine teeth somehow broke through Vonkus's source power defense and deeply embedded into Vonkus's right arm, tearing it apart. At this moment, Vonkus had lost the pain in his right arm. The pain all over his body had completely paralyzed his senses, but the middle-aged man laughed happier and happier. He smiled and stuffed his entire right arm into the silver wolf's mouth, and then, all the source power in his body was stuffed into his right arm. Vonkus's entire right hand swelled up as thick as a thigh. After a few seconds, the blood vessels on his arm began to burst one after another. A few moments later, Vonkus's entire arm exploded like a bomb, completely shattered into a piece of flesh and blood. With a muffled explosion, the source of the torrent evolved into a bomb, pushing Vonkus far away, and the impact made Vonkus' chest concave. He flew up and fell to the back of the human line like a meteor. Gluo said nothing, just threw away the wine jug and rushed to the place where Vonkus fell like crazy. Chapter 182, The Long End. At this time, in front of the human line, the giant wolf with silver white fur had completely lost its voice. Its entire mouth had been blown away, half of its head had turned into blood plasma, and its tall body fell down with a bang, never to stand up again. From the very beginning, this was Von Kuss's plan. His original talent, the ultimate hatred, was an ability that only worked on the werewolf Sapien. He was actually a special attack weapon against the werewolf Sapien. In a sense, every drop of his blood was poisonous to the werewolf Sapien, and it was a highly toxic poison only for himself. In the end, Von Kuss used his right arm as bait to expose the most vulnerable weakness of the werewolf Sapien, his internal organs. Von Kuss succeeded. He successfully created a result of mutual destruction. Von Kuss. Because of the distance, GLUO was unable to catch Von Kuss in the end, but fortunately the middle-aged man fell on a tent and did not die from the fall. Von Kuss. GLUO walked to the middle-aged man, half knelt on the ground, and tried to wake up Von Kuss. At this time, Von Kuss was extremely miserable. His right arm had completely disappeared, his chest was sunken, his face was covered with blood, and the blood from the wounds all over his body had dyed the rainproof tent red. Mr. Von Kuss. Faced with the middle-aged man's condition, GLUO did not dare to do anything, and could only shout him loudly. After a few shouts, Von Kuss actually slowly opened his eyes. "Child. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Von Kuss apologized in a low voice, as if he could not express his apology, no matter how he apologized. GLUO gritted his teeth, and did not answer, but just grabbed Von Kuss's left hand hard. I also want to save everyone, but I can't save them, so I can only find a way to prevent them from affecting morale. The dying middle-aged man showed GLUO a guilty smile, and GLUO nodded gently, unable to say a word. In the whole thing, Von Kuss made a lot of mistakes, and even many things he did were not considered a good person, but he fulfilled his promise with his life. I don't agree with all your actions, but there is no doubt that the werewolf Sapien did die in your hands, in the hands of the wolf hunters. GLUO held Von Kuss's hands with both hands, and the sticky blood dyed the young man's hands red. The remaining warmth made GLUO feel a burning will, in the face of life, good or bad, right or wrong. Is it really that important? It's finally over, my wife, son, and captain. I succeeded. Von Kuss opened his eyes and looked at the dark night. The moonlight was reflected in his pupils like 1,000 silver threads. The middle-aged man took a deep breath and said the last words without pause. It's really a long revenge. It was a sigh, or perhaps a low roar. Thousands of emotions were revealed in Von Kuss's words. After the middle-aged man said this, he slowly closed his eyes and never woke up again. Thank you for teaching me. GLUO slowly let go of Von Kuss's hand. Then he stood up and bowed deeply to the middle-aged man on the ground. GLUO, although it's a bit disappointing, but things don't seem to be over yet. You don't have time to be sad here. Kichudi always followed behind GLUO. She was like an observer, recording and judging all the situations. She didn't care about the life and death of these people. What's wrong? GLUO took the wet wipes handed over by Kichudi and wiped the blood off his hands without much expression on his face. Logically speaking, the werewolf Sapien is dead, so these modified products it created should have escaped directly, but they didn't escape. Although GLUO didn't quite understand the current situation, he had heard that wolves that lost their king would flee in all directions. But now, GLUO did not hear the sound of the wolves fleeing, nor did he hear any signal from humans that the crisis had been resolved. All the people on the western front of the camp were still staring at the front from their positions. The arc formed by the black group was still lying in the distance and had not disappeared into the darkness. The werewolf Sapien is not dead. GLUO took a breath, and the cold wind made him shiver all over. This possibility was too terrible. If this couldn't kill him, how could he die? Not necessarily the wolf just now, who could speak human language, should be the werewolf Sapien, but the problem is that the werewolf Sapien is not the wolf king, but the master of the wolf pack. What if the wolf king of the wolf pack exists somewhere else? A wild beast of the 3 blue steel level. It's scary to think about it. Wild beast. This was the first time GLUO heard this name, but GLUO guessed that it should be used to refer to the existence of wild beasts similar to evolvers. Yes, it is a wild beast, otherwise it is called an evolved beast. If it is called this, humans will not show their nobility. Kichudi still had a leisurely expression. Gluo was very anxious at first, but looking at Kichudi's appearance, he slowly regained his composure. A wild beast of level 3 blue steel. Is it very powerful? Of course it is powerful. At the same level, the combat effectiveness of humans and wild beasts is very different. Kichudi was obviously very familiar with wild beasts. The 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau was originally established to maintain social security. Their main responsibility is to face wild beasts and evolvers. Wild beasts have sharp claws and powerful bodies. Their source power reserves are twice or even 3 times that of humans. The hardness and defense of its bones, flesh, and fur. Wild beasts can beat humans by several streets. And the strengths of humans are only thinking ability, weapons, and full strength source martial arts. Kichudi deliberately mentioned the word source martial arts at the end. Gluo was not surprised by this. In martial arts novels, there was internal force and the 18 dragon subduing palms. Now the evolvers have come out. The source force is so strong, it is not much more advanced than the internal force. Gluo, I still want to talk to you for a while, but now it seems that I may not have time. Kichudi seemed to suddenly feel something. She turned her head, looked at the western front, and slowly narrowed her eyes. Let's go. Gluo took a last look at Vonkus, who was sleeping forever on the ground, and walked towards the western front. The night spread, and the front line that was not built too deliberately extended in an arc. More than 50 humans were holding weapons, and many of them were injured, and just barely holding on. In the silence, a cold wind suddenly blew, and the cold feeling poured into Gluo's clothes, making his body tremble violently. The incomplete moon stared at the land indifferently. After the cool spring breeze died down, the whole wolf pack suddenly moved. As if it was a command from their blood, more than 20 black wolves suddenly turned around together, their backs facing the humans, their heads facing the direction of the sunset, and they howled loudly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183, Collision. Ayo. The howling of more than 20 wolves was very loud, but the creepy howl did not last for too long. When the howling stopped, all the black wolves bent down again, as if they were respectfully waiting for the arrival of the king. A moment later, the existence they were waiting for, fearing, and submitting to, appeared. It was a wild wolf twice the size of an ordinary black wolf. It was much smaller than the human wolf Sapien killed by Vonkus before. Its fur was pure white, but its eyes were pure green fluorescence. The wild wolf bent down, step by step from far to near, and the green source of natural attributes surrounded it. The source of smoky mist was lingering around it. It can release source power. It is a blue steel level 3rd. A blue steel level 3 wild beast. We are finished. We can't outrun it. Everyone will die here. At this moment, the human line seemed to be shaken by an earthquake. Some people couldn't even hold their weapons tightly. Green wolf pupils. Behind the eyepiece of the sniper rifle, Minimum Yashu's tongue seemed to be tied when he spoke, and fear and despair flowed through his body. The kind of hope that is sought at all costs. But after a short dawn, the darkness still covers the sky, and the result after all kinds of struggles is still death. Despair, pain, doubt. Despair of dying, pain of being powerless, and questioning whether everything he has paid before is meaningful. We are finished. We are all going to die. Before seeing the power of the 3 blue steel order wild beast, humans may still fight to the death. But after seeing the previous battle of Fenkas, everyone clearly knows the gap of despair. It is impossible. Impossible. Impossible at all. How can I still live? People are in despair. Some cry, some give up on themselves, and some grit their teeth and fight to the death. But more people are retreating. More people want to die later, or die with their important people. At this time, the giant wolf with green eyes walked to the dead human wolf Sapien, and bowed its head, without the nostalgia and pain that people imagined. It raised its claws to hold down the body of its master, and used its fangs to split the neck of the dead wolf corpse. The wolf kiss penetrated its body and began to pull and chew. Oh, I understand why the human wolf sapien didn't let it out. He couldn't control it. Although Kichudi had seen a few wild beasts of the 3 blue steel level, to be honest, this was the first time she had seen a man-made wild beast of the 3 blue steel level. What kind of horrible things can the human wolf sapien create? But the means of control are obviously insufficient. In order to prevent the master from being devoured, he dared not release it until he died. How stupid. Kichudi has always been very quiet in front of GLUO, but at this time, her whole temperament suddenly became extremely cold. No matter what, this should all end. You yourself? GLUO turned his head and looked at Kichudi at this time and suddenly felt extremely strange. If before, GLUO still felt that there were remnants of Kichudi in the past, it must be that Kichudi could perform to please him. Now, the girl who has experienced countless battlefields will start fighting again. Those disguises and masks can no longer be maintained after all. I'm enough by myself. Kichudi combed her hair, took off the exquisite hair accessories on her head, and put them in her pocket. The 19th Bureau of National Security is divided into 6 subdivisions: National Security, Assault, Inspection, Supervision, Inspection, and Investigation. Among them, the Assault Division is responsible for frontal combat, and I am the captain of the 17th team. You don't really think that I got to this position by relying on connections, right? In the entire 19th Bureau of National Security, I'm the youngest team captain. In GLUO's eyes, Kichudi had a proud look, and the truth inside was sad. She was only 22 years old this year, the age when many people go to college. But why did she come to this point now? Kichudi, I'm sorry. I know, I forgive you. Kichudi tilted her head slightly, with a faint smile on her cheek. She seemed to have been waiting for GLUO's apology. It was not an apology without reason or clue, but because he felt sorry for her, so he was apologetic. Wait for me to come back. At that moment, in the eyes of everyone's surprise, expectation, and hesitation, Kichudi walked to the front line, like Fenkus before, stepped across the defense line, and walked towards the wolf pack and the bloody battlefield. The bloody wind swept across. Kichudi stepped on the grass and gradually approached the giant wolf. At this moment, the green-eyed wolf king took his head away from the corpse, and there was still blood on his mouth, and his scarlet tongue licked it deftly. Then, it turned around and looked directly at Kichudi, who was approaching. In those green pupils, there was contempt and ridicule that only existed in human eyes. Kichudi, however, just looked calm and approached in a simple and unsophisticated manner. The giant wolf shook its head, raised its body, and looked down at the human, who was much smaller than it. The color of the moonlit night seemed the same as before, with green grass stretching out, and only a little bloody smell spreading with the wind. While walking, Kichudi raised her hand, and blood-red source power escaped from all parts of her body, and the dazzling smoke flashed the color of death. And just in front of Kichudi, the pure white giant wolf still stood still. Its green eyes looked at the girl who was walking towards it, and the cold emotion made it slowly raise its head and open its mouth at the same time. The light green source power began to gather rapidly in the wild wolf's mouth. It raised its head, stared at Kichudi, and a green source power sphere was completed in a few breaths. The giant wolf with green eyes took a deep breath, raised its head suddenly, and then swung it down. At that moment, it suddenly exhaled forward. Kichudi witnessed the gathering process of the source force ball in the mouth of the wild wolf, so when the attack came, the girl just raised her hand, pointed her right finger into a knife, and the real red source force turned into an empty blade, instantly colliding with the flying source force ball. Boom. The sound of the source force collision was like a thunderous shock. The two broke each other in midair, and the chaotic source force airflow exploded, blowing the hair on Kichudi's forehead into disarray. The green pupils of the pure white giant wolf stared at Kichudi. The wolf kissed her and grinned. It lowered its body and suddenly ran forward to meet Kichudi. The green source force around the wild wolf was as dense as substance. When the wolf's claws stepped on the ground, the grass exploded. On the eve of the collision, Kichudi's body was as tight as a bow, and the blood-red source force lingered around her, like the mist when an immortal took off. Then, thunder on the ground, the wind burst. Chapter 184, Blood Song. Invisible waves spread out in the collision. Kichudi stood in front of the huge white wolf, as small as a child. But in this extremely contrasting contrast, Kichudi confronted fearlessly. As if blood was steaming, the bright red source power rose from the girl's body, and as time passed, it gradually suppressed the white wolf. Green source power. Natural attribute? It's the first time I've seen it. Kichudi stomped her right foot on the ground, and the land, which was under great pressure, suddenly sank into a deep pit. The next moment, the girl twisted her body like dancing, and kicked forward with the power of thunder. Bang! In the collision of the source power, the white wolf was ultimately a bit inferior. It was pushed back several meters. After stopping, the white wolf began to raise its head and howl, and the wolf pack behind it began to slowly move forward, as if preparing to launch an attack. It's meaningless. Kichudi spread her palm expressionlessly, and the source talent named Blood Song began to be activated. The blood in her body began to evaporate rapidly, as if it was ignited. The red blood turned into visible mist and escaped from the pores all over her body. The mist mixed and merged with the source power, flashing the same color as light, like a dream, like a fusion of smoke and brilliance. Kichudi pursed her lips, and the blood escaped from her body like burning smoke. Her heart beat as fast as raindrops hitting the ground. Blood Song, separation and hatred. The next moment, the girl stretched out her right hand and grabbed at her side. The mist mixed with blood and source power began to gather, condensed into liquid, and then fixed its shape. It was a sword. A sword about 3 fingers wide, with a blade length of 1.2 meters and a handle length of 30 centimeters. The entire blade seemed to be condensed from blood, but it had the appearance of a physical state. The bloody red was pure and clear, like smoke and light. The handle and the blade were perfectly connected, without any decoration or traces of carving. It should be made by humans, but humans cannot make it. This is a sword condensed from my blood. I call it Lihan. It has a poor effect on dead objects, but it kills living things with blood. At this moment, facing Kichudi, who looked like a bloody god of death, the giant wolf with pure white fur looked at the blood sword in her hand, and there was a flash of fear in its green eyes. It stood there, no longer any majestic momentum. So, you are going to die. A smile suddenly appeared on Kichudi's face, and she began to move forward, step by step, faster and faster. Roar. The giant wolf looked at Kichudi's rushing figure, and no longer had the ferocity before. In the mouth of the white wolf, a green source force ball once again gathered, and it was thicker and more condensed than before. But, when the source force ball flew towards Kichudi, Kichudi just stretched out the blade of the sword in the trajectory of the source force ball. When the green source force ball touched the blood sword, it dissipated like cotton wool, without even a ripple. Such a weak source force will collapse in front of this blood sword. Kichudi's body was still moving forward, and she always had a smile on her face. On the other side, as if angered by Kichudi's attitude, the giant wolf suddenly raised its head and rushed towards Kichudi. Kichudi once again lived close to the giant wolf without fear. The wild wolf stared at her with its green eyes, and the giant claws full of source force swung towards Kichudi, but Kichudi did not dodge or avoid, but just waved the blood sword in her hand. Squeak. Kichudi had obviously practiced swordsmanship for a long time. Her figure was ethereal and swift. The white wolf was clearly thinking of exchanging injuries for injuries, but Kichudi dodged its claws. And, a sword tore its side ribs. The green-eyed giant wolf had exhausted all its source power to build a defense. In front of the snow in Kichudi's hand, it was just like a piece of paper. Kichudi's long sword blade tore its side ribs, and a big red hole was torn on the snow-white fur. The blood overflowed like a stream. Now, I have your blood. Kichudi's smile was very bright. She did not approach the white wolf, but began to quickly distance herself, as if she was going to launch a long-range attack. While moving, Kichudi's left hand holding the blood sword suddenly exerted force, and her palm was directly cut by the sharp blade, and the red blood began to flow rapidly into the sword blade. In just a few seconds, the blade in Kichudi's hand nearly doubled in size. The girl suddenly raised her hand, swung the blood-colored blade in her hand, and began to dance around her body. As she danced rapidly, the blade gradually lost its shape in the light and shadow, and became shorter and more blurred, and finally seemed to turn into a touch of crimson light. Bloodsong Hate returned spear. When Kichudi stopped, a red short spear made entirely of blood was shaking in her palm, as if it was about to fly out at any time. And just when this red short spear was fully formed, fear appeared in the green eyes of the wild wolf. It turned around and ran away without any roar. Use blood as a mark, die because of hatred. Kichudi raised her hand, arched her back, and suddenly threw the short spear in her hand towards the wild wolf. The pure white giant wolf fled to the distance like crazy, but the blood spear thrown by Kichudi flew faster and faster, as if it was guided by something to accurately track the position of the giant wolf. Roar. The running blue steel level wild wolf suddenly let out a howl. It turned around and faced the flying blood-colored shotgun. All the source power in its body was condensed around it, and it looked like a perfect set of armor. But when Kichudi's blood gun hit it, everything the giant wolf had became meaningless. The heavy source defense was directly penetrated, and the blood gun pierced straight into its body from the wound. Then, the giant wolf's body stiffened, and it fell to the ground with a bang. The next moment, the internal organs of this blue steel level wild wolf had turned into blood, and as it fell, it spurted out from the wound on its chest. And with the death of the Wolf King, more than 20 black wolves also began to flee in all directions. They no longer had any cues or commanders, and they quickly disappeared into the night like stray dogs running for their lives. Under the moonlight, the girl named Kichudi stood quietly in the blood. She turned around, with only one person in her eyes. She showed a brilliant smile, her lips moved slightly, and she seemed to be saying something. At that moment, it was as if they had a telepathic connection. Although Gluo was still far away from her, he could understand what she was saying. Gluo, we finally meet. Now, I can protect you. For more than 5 years, this was what the girl wanted to say the most during her countless tears of regret. Now, they finally met, and she finally conveyed this sentence to Gluo. Ah. I saw it. Chapter 185. Busy. When the wolves retreated, the human defense line was silent. Minimum Yashu stood there blankly, unable to believe that the wild beast of level 3 blue steel was killed by Kichudi in one blow. However, the wolves had indeed retreated, and they were really saved. At this moment, when they should have cheered, people were not so happy, because tonight, their wolf hunting group fulfilled their long cherished wish, but half of them slept here forever. Of course, all this has nothing to do with Gluo, and it has nothing to do with Kichudi. Those wolves have all run away, is it okay? Gluo took a few steps forward, and walked towards Kichudi. The girl had already dispersed her source power at this time, and her expression was a little tired. It doesn't matter. The 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau has already arranged it. None of them can escape. So, everything is arranged. Gluo turned his head and looked at the camp. After the crisis of death, most people did not feel real. Many people collapsed on the ground. Sadness, confusion, and helplessness spread to everyone. Gluo didn't like this look. There are only two results. I take action or I don't. Kichudi seemed very confident in herself. She stretched out her hand to grab Gluo, but when she stretched it out in the air, the girl retracted her arm. Let's go. There's no need to stay here. Okay. Gluo did not refute Kichudi's words. The two walked back to the camp. People around them made way. Some people wanted to come over to talk, but were stopped by Kichudi's eyes. After a night of turmoil, fortunately, the off-road vehicle driven by Kichudi was fine. The girl opened the door and sat in the driver's seat, but Gluo did not sit in the back this time. Kichudi did not ask Gluo why he chose to be the co-pilot, but when she started the car, the girl showed a slight smile on her face. Along the way, the suburbs were silent. To be honest, it was hard for Gluo to imagine what kind of preparations the National Security Bureau 19 had made to be so confident that there was no obstruction around. However, Gluo was quite confident in the ability of the National Security Bureau 19. He had been an evolver for 10 years, and had been looking for other evolvers, but he couldn't find them. Gluo studied various forum news every day, but he never saw any special reports about superpowers. In any case, at least in terms of intelligence blockade, it is definitely a major pillar of social stability. Kichudi, do we really not need to worry about the camp? GLUO took out his mobile phone and looked at the local news in Changlin City. Not to mention the wolf pack, even the explosions were not noticed by anyone. No, the patrol in the 19th Bureau of the National Security is the one who specializes in finishing. I'm affiliated with the assault. My main task is to confront head-on. As long as the enemy is defeated, everything else will be left to others. Kichuda's battle just now seemed a little understated, but at this time, the sequelae took effect. Because of excessive blood loss, the girl's face was very pale and her lips were bloodless. Although she forced herself to chat with GLUO could see that she was not in good condition. After all, it was a wild beast of the 3 blue steel level. No one felt its threat because it had been killed by Kichudi before it showed its destructive power. The result of the battle was close to an instant kill at the same level. It is conceivable what kind of power Kichudi has gathered. In fact, in GLUO's opinion, Kichudi didn't need to be so desperate, but the girl might also have the attitude of showing him strength. That's fine. It's not easy for you either. GLUO looked at Kichuda's tired and weak appearance and felt a little uncomfortable, but he didn't show it, just stopped talking and gave Kichudi more time to rest. Compared with when they came, Kichuda's speed was a little faster when they returned to the city, but when the two officially entered the city, it was already late at night. Originally, GLUO was still a little hesitant about whether Kichudi should take him home, but he didn't want to call. The car had just entered the city when the 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau called. Because it involved confidential information, Kichudi didn't talk much, just hummed a few times. After hanging up the phone, Kichudi was a little helpless, but GLUO waved his hand to her with understanding. Go to work first, that side is more important. GLUO didn't delay Kichuda's time. He directly asked the girl to put him on the side of the road, and then under the girl's apologetic eyes, he turned and walked into the night. Not long after, GLUO stopped, turned around and looked at Kichuda's car going away, rubbing his head with a headache. Too many things happened on this day. On Tang Ruox's first day as a teacher, she took him out to eat roasted whole lamb, and as a result, he awakened his original talent halfway. During the delay, something happened to Xiaodao Chuanwu. When he came back, things had reached a point where they had to fight. GLUO had no choice but to leave and return to being an unemployed vagrant. However, next, it turned out that an old friend wanted to see him, and Nan, a friend he hadn't seen for a long time, suddenly appeared in front of him. Then, his first love girlfriend came. Kichuda's changes were so drastic that it was even hard to imagine that it was the same person, but among these strangeness, GLUO saw the familiarity that had never changed. What a sin. In the middle of the night, GLUO sat on the curb and sent a text message to Su Qinghan on his mobile phone, telling her that he would be back later. Then, GLUO called Zhu Yi, Tang Ruoxi and Kao Junian, and called them out. Why did he call them over? To eat. GLUO hadn't eaten since the roasted whole lamb at noon, and now he was starving. As for the others, Tang Ruoxi had originally said that she would be a part-time teacher, but now that GLUO had left, she had no choice but to leave. Zhu Yi was an honest man. No matter what he thought before, he would definitely follow GLUO when he was no longer working there. On the phone, GLUO learned that Zhu Yi's girlfriend Yuan Wan had also resigned and walked out with him. To be honest, GLUO was really surprised. Although GLUO was optimistic about Zhu Yi, that was because he felt that he was extraordinary, and then he was optimistic about Zhu Yi, so even if he couldn't do it, he could still pull him up. However, Yuan Wan, that girl, was actually quite smart. She was a city girl, but she actually liked the silly Zhu Yi. Was this considered a brilliant vision? Finally, Kao Junian is still working as a security guard, on duty at midnight every day, freezing like a fool. The younger brother is so miserable, and as the elder brother, he can't not express his gratitude. So, GLUO called them together. What? Start a business. Now, 3 of the 4 of them are unemployed, and 1 is an unemployed student. Anyway, let's not talk about anything else. First, find a way to make money and stabilize people's hearts. Chapter 186. Angry. At noon, GLUO was standing alone on the street. There were only a few vehicles passing by, and the windows with lights on could be seen from a distance. What is this place? It's too dark. GLUO's activities usually did not leave the city. Now Kichudi suddenly threw him on the side of the road, and GLUO didn't know where he was. Fortunately, GLUO brought his mobile phone and fiddled with the map for a while. GLUO finally knew why there were so few people around. After a long time, this place is a cemetery, I thought. Why is the yin energy so heavy? GLUO tucked his collar, feeling a little scared. Aiming at the place with lights in the distance, GLUO quickly started jogging. This place. Can I get a taxi? GLUO thought about the time and place agreed by the 4 people and was a little worried about how he would get there. At this time, basically no driver would drive here, and it was not possible to book a taxi online with extra money, and no one would accept the order. I'm embarrassed to ask someone to pick me up. GLUO searched for a long time and finally found a place that was still open. Before entering, GLUO thought to himself that the owner of this store was very bold. He dared to open near the cemetery at midnight. However, when GLUO really walked into the store, he was immediately scared. Wow, there were a row of wreaths and paper money outside, and there was a small dim light bulb. There were not many goods in the cabinets, but inside the store, funeral supplies were visible to the naked eye. They were densely packed. Isn't it not afraid? The store is full of things for the dead. There are a lot of paper money at the door. Passing ghosts can just take the money and leave. It's convenient. Boss, buy a pack of cigarettes. GLUO was afraid of scaring the old man, and he deliberately lowered his voice. Who knew that the store owner, who was over 75 years old, ignored GLUO and was still staring at the TV intently. Old man, I want to buy cigarettes. Take it yourself. The old store owner didn't hear what GLUO said. He was unwilling to pay attention to GLUO. His attitude towards making money was called casual. Of course, he is almost 80 years old, and he is not short of money. Look at the things in this room. After he dies, I'm afraid that another rich man will be born in the underworld. Oh. GLUO doesn't smoke often, but when he is in a bad mood, he will try to relieve his mood. Boss, check out. 25. The old shopkeeper didn't even look at GLUO. There was a palace fight and a sad drama on TV, and the old man was watching it with relish, as if he saw a different life. What could GLUO say? He could only pay obediently, although he felt that he was cheated by him. But in this wilderness, in the middle of the night when no one was around, people still opened a store to sell things, so it was reasonable to be a little more expensive. However, GLUO felt that this old man was watching the palace fight and a sad drama now, and he must be preparing for his next life. Is this to understand the employment market in advance and upgrade his skills? Young man, there are no cars tonight. If you can't walk back, you can sleep here for one night. Although the old shopkeeper ignored GLUO, when GLUO was about to leave, he suddenly wanted to rescue GLUO kindly. GLUO felt warm in his heart and turned around to speak, but the old man made him close his mouth first. I won't charge you more. 300 is enough. No need. GLUO was almost angry. Your broken place is surrounded by wreaths and paper money. If you know it, you can stay. If you don't know it, you will think it is dead and waiting to be buried. Who would live here? 300 for one night and not more money. I'm going to vomit. Well, okay, then you go slowly. The old man didn't care about GLUO's refusal. He still crossed his legs and watched TV by himself. GLUO was so angry. After walking out of the store, GLUO looked at the dark and deserted surroundings. He suddenly felt a little thirsty. He was about to go back to buy a bottle of water when he saw the old man staggering to the door and directly locked it. Every mistake. He closed the business. And, at the very end, the old man looked at GLUO with disdain, as if to say, if you want to change your mind, do it now, otherwise you will cry later. GLUO silently opened the cigarette box and told him with a tough look, I would rather sleep on the tree outside than in your house. Then, GLUO lit a cigarette, exhaled a puff of smoke, and left in a chic manner. Of course, in the eyes of the old shopkeeper, GLUO was like the wind whistling, and the issue cold, and the person walked away and there was no hope. Good people are bullied. GLUO walked to the road and operated on his mobile phone for a while, but unfortunately no one took the order. His place was too unlucky and no one came. What a sin. GLUO held a cigarette in his mouth and simply sat on the curb. He was thinking about who to call so that he would not look so embarrassed. As a result, before GLUO could hesitate, a car suddenly came with high beams. High beam dog. GLUO was very annoyed by the flash of light, and what was even more annoying was that he always felt that the light was deliberately shining on him, getting closer and closer. Anyway, GLUO was not afraid of being hit, so he did not leave, but sat there to see what the other party wanted to do. If the other party stopped the car later and did not give him a good explanation, then he must give him a ride. Just when GLUO felt that his idea was impossible, the car with high beams on actually got closer and closer and stopped in front of GLUO. GLUO sat on the curb, holding a cigarette that was mostly blown away by the wind. When he looked up, he saw the back door of the taxi opened and a girl wearing a fox mask jumped out of the car. GLUO, how about it? Are you touched? If you didn't ask me that, I would be much more touched. Although GLUO said so, he couldn't help but smile when he stood up. GLUO really didn't expect that Tang Ruoxi would come to pick him up. To be honest, in this desolate and gloomy place, it feels really good to have someone come to take you out. I've been here before, and I know it's hard to get a taxi here, and no one else wants to come. Tang Ruoxi raised her eyebrows and signaled to GLUO that the driver was also unwilling to come, but she used some special methods to make him drive over. Of course, either he gave more money or punched him a few more times. Thank you for your help. GLUO sat in the back seat with Tang Ruoxi. The taxi driver looked at him, didn't dare to say anything, and stepped on the accelerator to speed up. Tang Ruoxi, you're going out a little too fast. I was feeling unwell at home, so I ran out. Tang Ruoxi was very open-minded. If there was anything, she would say it directly, without beating around the bush or hiding anything. Did your parents know? What was their reaction? Of course they knew. They saw me wearing a mask and thought I was disfigured. Tang Ruoxi didn't seem willing to bring up this topic, but now her relationship with GLUO was closer, and it was indeed unusual, so some things could be talked about. Chapter 187, Touched. I was so annoyed by them that I took off the mask and showed them the result. Tang Ruoxi sighed deeply when she said this and seemed very upset. They said I had plastic surgery and spent so much money to get such a good result. Your parents are very open-minded. GLUO could imagine that Tang Ruoxi's parents must be full of disbelief when they saw Tang Ruoxi now, and they even wanted to do a blood test to see if this was their daughter. She was so cute that she didn't look like the Tang Ruoxi in the past at all. They said that seeing me like this now, they are not worried anymore. In the past, they thought that I would be so violent that it would be difficult to find a partner in the future. Now that I'm so cute, there must be many people who are not afraid of death, so I don't have to worry about finding a partner. As a beautiful girl of the new era who can eat and fight, Tang Ruoxi firmly believes that her future boyfriend must respect herself, and there must be no old-fashioned concepts at all. You don't have to worry about it. You were already cute enough in the past. GLUO wanted to follow Tang Ruoxi's words, but fortunately he was smart and jumped back from the edge of the cliff and didn't fall into the abyss. Girls like others to praise her now, but they must never belittle her in the past, otherwise they will be hated. It's all useless. Although Tang Ruoxi wanted to pretend that she didn't care, GLUO knew that the girl was in a good mood just by looking at her shining eyes. By the way, GLUO, that Nan has been secretly in love with you for a long time. No, it should be said that she has been in love with you for a long time. Tang Ruoxi had talked enough about her own topics, so she turned her attention to GLUO. GLUO didn't want to mention these things, but when he heard about his acquaintance from Tang Ruoxi, GLUO couldn't keep silent after all. And Nan, she is a very good child. She is still in school and meets too few people. GLUO knew Annan's thoughts many years ago, but he really didn't have any thoughts about her. The two were just friends at the time, and he didn't have too many emotions when they broke up. Back then, he was too stubborn and obstinate. He just believed without reservation that Kichudi had betrayed her mother and his life. So, he resolutely cut off all relations. Later, Annan got to know his new phone number in a roundabout way. When the two chatted, there was only inevitable embarrassment. From the beginning to the end, the connection between the two has always been Kichudi. Facing the wound in GLUO's heart, the two's avoidance is a kind of harm. So, this kind of contact has become less. It's not easy for you either. Tang Ruoxi originally wanted to tease GLUO and learn some gossip topics, but seeing GLUO's serious expression, the girl put away her playful thoughts. Although some tricks were used, the information Tang Ruoxi got from Annan and Aang Kalen could roughly piece together the former GLUO, a vague but impressive boy. Don't advise others to be kind without experiencing their suffering. Tang Ruoxi didn't know everything about the past, so she didn't mention Kichudi to GLUO. After all, from the information known now, Tang Ruoxi also thinks that GLUO's choice is right. If it were her, she would do the same. By the way, GLUO, it's so late, why did you call me out? And that Zuyi, and Kyo Chunian, a man with high emotional intelligence. GLUO and Tang Ruoxi changed the topic together. Because they mentioned the business, GLUO's expression became serious. Tang Ruoxi, I think you also feel that this world is slowly becoming dangerous. We need to make some preparations. A group of heroes competing for supremacy? Rebel against you. I mean to protect yourself. GLUO was really irritated by Tang Ruoxi. When he first met Tang Ruoxi, he felt that she was serious and stubborn. But after more contact, GLUO slowly discovered that Tang Ruoxi's mind was full of ghost ideas. She read too many anime novels and played too many games. Her ideas were obviously contrary to common sense. Moreover, GLUO doubted whether the reason why Tang Ruoxi liked to practice martial arts so much was also influenced by the second dimension. Now she is even more the cutest in the world. Well, that makes sense. What should we do? I don't have any idea how to do it, but I want to do something first, which can not only support us, but also keep us up to date with the latest information, and stay sensitive to the world. GLUO had a whole set of ideas in his mind at the time, but he couldn't tell Tang Ruoxi now. Fortunately, Tang Ruoxi didn't ask. She just looked at GLUO with round eyes, and her face behind the mask was full of interest. GLUO, what are you going to do? Ahem. I plan to set up an organization similar to a private detective agency to solve some problems for our clients. GLUO didn't mention the Evolver directly, but Tang Ruoxi immediately nodded thoughtfully, as if she understood it very well. GLUO, is it the kind of detective agency in Conan, accepting the invitation of the rich, investigating the case for him, and then getting a large commission? No, I don't think so. GLUO cut off the girl's fantasy without hesitation. Good guy, it's still Conan. One person dies in one episode, and dies wherever they go. If this is true, it would have been closed long ago. He was either invited to have tea by the police, or no one asked him to do anything, and he was finally starved to death. Anyway, we don't get involved in troublesome things, and we'd better leave the murder cases to the police. What we do is to do the right things and maintain world peace. It's our duty. GLUO was joking, but Tang Ruoxi took it seriously. After all, she was only 16 years old and was still a little princess in her heart. Now that she has become an evolver, she wants to be a superhero. In this world, demons and gods have risen up. Although I have no intention of competing, I know the suffering of the people. Ah, what do you mean? The sky is moving. Tang Ruoxi bullied GLUO for not playing games, and her tone was deep. Let's call our office this. Instead of this, I would rather call it the World Salvation Association. At least it has a louder name. GLUO originally wanted to ridicule Tang Ruoxi, but the girl looked conflicted, hesitated for a moment, and actually nodded. Okay, let's call it the World Rescue Association. I'll get involved too. You're the president, I'm the vice president. Zuyi is honest and a good tool man. He can be responsible for trivial matters that don't require our help. Kyo-Junian, you said he has high emotional intelligence, then he will be responsible for attracting customers. Tang Ruoxi is an old capitalist, she spoke without hesitation, and directly built the framework of the firm, and determined the position. But don't tell me, Tang Ruoxi's ideas coincide with GLUO's. Of course, there are 4 people in total, and there is nothing to change. That's called listening to the people's sufferings, and solving people's livelihood problems. Chapter 188, Confirmation. GLUO had not noticed before, but now he feels that Tang Ruoxi actually has such potential as a dog-headed military strategist. Her analysis is really suitable. GLUO and Tang Ruoxi are 2 evolvers, so they must have the cards. As the founders of the association, they must be the president and vice president. Zuyi has a calm personality, and is a person who works hard, and does not talk too much. It is most suitable to be transferred to the grassroots to help the masses. As for Kyo-Junian, he likes to figure out people's thoughts. It would be great to send him to do diplomacy. Moreover, he is very good at judging the situation. Although he has some doubts now, as long as he sees some things, he will naturally return to his heart. Zuyi's girlfriend is called Yuan, right? She is in the finance department of the fitness management. It's just right. She can be directly brought over, and the salary can be maintained at the previous level. Tang Ruoxi can be said to be the king of mouth cannons. The influence of various games has made her an old operator. She uses all the resources that can be used, and arranges all the people who can be arranged clearly. Raise the price a bit. They are sincere in changing jobs. We can't be ungrateful. GLUO sat next to Tang Ruoxi, as steady as a rock. The girl turned her head, and looked at him, then nodded. It's up to you. We are all working for you anyway. No, there's no need to work. I plan to invest 200,000 yuan in the initial establishment of the firm. I will take the majority, you will take a small part, and the rest will be given to them. GLUO hadn't thought about these things just now. He was just planning to do something, but after Tang Ruoxi's reminder, GLUO's thoughts gradually increased. Do you have so much money to burn? Tang Ruoxi just thought that GLUO wanted everyone to pool their money to build a small business, but when she heard GLUO's 200,000 yuan, she couldn't help but frown. Since GLUO was going to give them shares, then this money was equivalent to giving it away for free. Is there such a good thing in the world? Not really, it's just that I have something and need your help. When GLUO thought of tomorrow's class reunion and auction, he felt very nervous. If he could get them involved, the whole thing might go a little smoother. Anyway, it's tomorrow. Even if they leak it, they can't find anyone who wants to hear it. Tang Ruoxi asked him for help and gave him 500,000 yuan. GLUO found a few more people and used the shares as compensation. Converted into money, it's only a few tens of thousands of yuan. However, this business can bring everyone together, which is a good way. Tomorrow, there is something that needs your help. Just treat it as the first action of our World Rescue Association. The reward is these shares. The matter is a bit dangerous. It's up to you whether you want to participate or not. Oh, you have a big plan. Tang Ruoxi leaned his head back and didn't give GLUO an answer immediately. If it was just a whim just now, then now, Tang Ruoxi is really considering this matter. GLUO has made it very clear that the company invested 200,000 yuan, and he holds most of the shares, but even if it is 1/10, it is 20,000 yuan, given for free. More importantly, GLUO invested so much money that it is reasonable to share the dividends with them equally. Either GLUO is a super good person, or this matter is very important to him and very dangerous. GLUO, is this related to the evolvers? Yes. GLUO hesitated whether to tell Tang Ruoxi about some plans, but before GLUO could speak, Tang Ruoxi had changed the subject. How much shares do you plan to give me? 20%? GLUO actually didn't care much about this little money. As long as Su Qinghan could succeed, it didn't matter what happened to the company. It would be good if it succeeded, but it would be normal if it didn't. Anyway, GLUO didn't plan to put too much energy on it. The main things were handed over to Zuyi and Kyo-Junian. If you want the horse to run, you must give it enough fodder. As for Tang Ruoxi, as the vice president, it is natural to trouble her if there are problems that cannot be solved in the association. GLUO, as the president, is in charge of the Central Army. If it is really necessary to take action, he will naturally not be stingy. The initial plan is that I will take 60% and Zuyi and Kaojanian will each take 10%. GLUO turned his head and observed Tang Ruoxi's expression, but the girl's expression was all behind the mask. Her pupils just looked at him normally, without any expression. Okay, I accept. Tang Ruoxi did not bargain with GLUO, but directly admitted the matter. GLUO looked at her strangely, feeling that she agreed too decisively. Tang Ruoxi, is that all? What else can I do? After all, you are also a senior, and I'm a newcomer. I'm completely in the dark. If I don't work for the senior, how can I guarantee my safety? Although Tang Ruoxi likes to criticize GLUO, after such a long time of contact, she still trusts GLUO. Unlike GLUO's mentality of an ordinary person, after Tang Ruoxi became an evolver, she had already calculated it over and over again in her mind. After all, she is a child who plays games every day, and she remembers how to develop and how to ensure a stable leveling. Anyway, after thinking about it, Tang Ruoxi can be sure that it is the best way for her to rely on GLUO during this period of time. Although GLUO is a bit of a bastard, he is indeed an upright person. A gentleman can be deceived by a method, so she can still make things difficult for him. If this matter were replaced by someone else, it would be hard to say. Okay, let's settle it like this. We'll discuss the details when we meet them later. GLUO also felt that things were a bit rushed, but at this point in time, the opportunity was just right. The 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau, GLUO heard about this organization for the first time today. I believe Tang Ruoxi also felt what this organization was used for, so she also had a sense of crisis. When eating barbecue today, Tang Ruoxi ate alone and didn't let anyone see her from beginning to end. Tang Ruoxi has already started to be careful. GLUO, what's wrong with this world? The girl's mood is as unpredictable as the weather in September. The girl was fine just now, but now her mood is suddenly wrong. Why did the evolvers suddenly appear? It wasn't like this in the past. Of course it wasn't like this in the past. GLUO didn't expect that Tang Ruoxi would suddenly think about this question. Perhaps many people have thought about this kind of thing, but in the end they will not get the answer and can only bury it deep in their hearts. However, GLUO knows that he may be the only person in the world who knows the truth. Outside the sky, an unknown existence from another dimension is about to knock on the door of the world. Its appearance is causing the Earth to have source power, and the concentration is increasing. Therefore, the number of evolvers is growing, and the mutation of various monsters has just begun. The future is actually the most dangerous. Now, the future is just approaching. Chapter 189. Sorry. The conversation between GLUO and Tang Ruoxi ended without a beginning or an end after that sentence. GLUO has always carried this heavy secret in his heart. When he was desperate and on the verge of collapse, he wanted to spread the news and let everyone know. However, after calming down, GLUO always gave up this idea and re-entered the pursuit of life. Life will never let you go, just because you are uncomfortable or unwilling. In despair, all humans can do is to find hope. As long as you are on the journey of finding hope, you will always have the courage and strength to move forward. After that chat, GLUO and Tang Ruoxi reached a tacit understanding. Then the two of them arrived at the hotel. Zuyi and Kaojanian had also arrived. The two chatted for a while and seemed to have a good chat. After that, the atmosphere between the four was good. GLUO took the opportunity to propose the idea of forming a World Rescue Association. Tang Ruoxi naturally nodded in agreement, and Zuyi decided to follow GLUO. Without thinking too much, he was a diehard. Kaojanian, the one who spent the longest time thinking among the four, knew what GLUO meant. Right now, GLUO had something that required everyone's help, and they had to do their best. A company with 200,000 yuan, 1/10 of the shares was 20,000 yuan for free, with dividends and participation in company decision making. The conditions were really tempting. Although Kyo Janian still had an idea of how dangerous the important matter Gluo mentioned was, he finally agreed. It was not because of the money, but because of Kyo Janian's ambition. He never thought that this situation was the life he deserved. In order to climb up, Kyo Janian would not be stingy at any cost. If he gambled his life, he would be willing to do so, as long as the benefits were big enough. In this way, the office named World Rescue Association was founded. Gluo was the president, Tang Ruoxi was the vice president, Zhu Yi was the director of the executive department, and Kyo Janian was the general manager. There were 4 people in the entire office, all of whom were officials with big names, and there was not a single ordinary employee. After that, Gluo did not discuss the issue of recruiting with them, but began to introduce their tasks for tomorrow. Of course, the 3 of them only did some peripheral work. The most important thing was probably to act as Gluo's eyes and report information to him in real time. Gluo didn't know how Su Qinghan monitored the overall situation. He was not as powerful as Su Qinghan. In the end, he could only hire a few people and leave it to fate. In the end, the dinner that started at midnight was a complete success. Gluo didn't drink, but Zhu Yi and Kyo Janian drank some. Gluo first called a taxi and sent them away. Afterwards, Gluo sent Tang Ruoxi to the gate of the community and then wandered back home. Hey, if you dawdle a little longer, it will be dawn. Gluo sat in front of the window, looking at the silvery moonlight, thinking about what he had experienced that day, and was a little stagnant for a while. Seeing Tang Ruoxi awaken her original talent, lose her leisurely and lucrative job, and meet her first love Kichudi again. Finally, he also saw a revenge drama intertwined with swords and fire. Gluo took his phone and searched for werewolf Sapin on the internet. There was nothing on the domestic internet. It was so clean that it was scary. Gluo also didn't find any useful information on the foreign internet, but the existence of evolvers was being promoted in a subtle way. The wind direction changed. It's hard to say whether it's a pity or unwillingness. Anyway, the National Security Bureau 19 has existed for 8 years, but Gluo has never heard of it. If it weren't for the appearance of Kichudi, Gluo would have thought that evolvers were rare. However, Kichudi's rough and unrestrained way of doing things shows that the National Security Bureau 19 is very special. They specifically target evolvers, but they are much more tolerant towards ordinary people. This world is becoming more and more unfamiliar. Gluo now has a stronger sense of crisis. If Gluo was a frog in the well before, now he has seen the vast sky and the raging waves of storms and thunder. This world is becoming more and more dangerous. The source force infiltrates this world, not only allowing evolvers to appear among humans, but also turning wild beasts into wild beasts. The threat is really unimaginable. Knock knock knock. Just when Gluo was feeling a little sleepy, the door of the house was suddenly knocked. Gluo opened the door in confusion, and then he found that Su Qinghan was actually looking for a time to come to him. Su Qinghan, you haven't slept yet? Gluo secretly glanced at the watch and found that it was only 4 o'clock in the morning. Su Qinghan was still not asleep at this time. Obviously, Su Qinghan had not rested all night. She was probably a little nervous in her heart. No, I talked to the intelligence dealer for a long time before, and I probably got some new information. Su Qinghan sat on the sofa, and Gluo poured her a cup of tea. Su Qinghan turned her head and looked at Gluo, who looked tired, and sighed apologetically. The authenticity of the gold cup cannot be confirmed by all channels. In the end, if you want to test the authenticity, you must attend the auction in person. Is there an exhibition at the auction? Of course not. Such an important thing has been hidden long ago. Su Qinghan has obviously considered many plans, but whether it can be implemented in the end depends on the situation. Gluo, if the method you came up with can work, it would be great. However, if the plan goes wrong, don't worry. I will find a way if necessary. Okay, then I'll leave it to you. Gluo did not tell Su Qinghan about Zhu Yi and Kyo Janian. Although Su Qinghan's plan was good, Gluo couldn't help but make preparations. Gluo had already made up his mind. Early tomorrow morning, he would change the return date to Tang Ruoxi's return after death. If necessary, Gluo did not recommend dying last time. GLUO. I'm sorry for involving you. Soo-kyung-hun sat on the sofa by the window. The girl held the water cup with an elegant and calm movement. She didn't care about herself, but since GLUO got involved, she had to guarantee his life. I did this voluntarily. Everything is voluntary. GLUO looked at Soo-kyung-hun's forced smile. For a moment, he even wanted to tell Soo-kyung-hun everything. But fortunately, GLUO held back. The relationship between the two of them had just gained trust, and something as important as the golden cup was about to happen. If they were suspicious of each other now, then everything would be over. Soo-kyung-hun, instead of saying sorry and thank you, don't always have a sad face. I like the way you smile brightly. GLUO blinked at Soo-kyung-hun and clearly told her that he liked for the first time, but GLUO was not ready yet, so he shifted the final direction to his expression. Okay, thank you. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190, The Person Who Arrived as Promised. January 26th. 3006, 9:11 in the luxurious hotel room. The girl who had just woken up leaned against the head of the bed, holding an old notebook in her hand, but it was not seriously worn, and was obviously well preserved. That night, I saw the stars in the sky explode, and countless tiny meteors scattered like a flickering rain curtain. I sat in front of the window, and my heart suddenly hurt so much that I couldn't speak. I felt lost forever. So, I woke up my family like crazy, and followed the guidance of my thoughts, and drove out of the city. The lights of thousands of homes were left behind me, and there were fewer and fewer pedestrians on the road, until there was none left. At that time, my father wanted to turn back, but he was moved by my pleading, and walked all the way to the wilderness outside the city. There, I saw GLUO lying on the ground, and the ground was like a star crashing, melting into a pit, so big that it was scary. He turned his head, looked at me, and smiled at me for the first time. Unlike the usual awkwardness, GLUO's eyes, when he was weak, seemed to be shining with starlight, vast and warm. He stretched out his palm, held my hand tightly, and then put a piece of black debris in my hand. The girl lowered her eyes. Her emotions seemed to have returned to a day many years ago. The strokes she wrote with her own hand seemed a little dim under the yellowed paper, but every time she read this text, everything at that time came vividly to her mind. I have never seen GLUO like that. He was powerless, weak and in pain. He told me to leave immediately, leave here, leave this city, leave this country. The farther the better, hide until the day he takes the initiative to see her. Before that, I must keep this fragment safe. I can't tell anyone, and can't give it to anyone. I nodded vigorously, sobbing, and then, GLUO took the fragment from my palm, and put it in my mouth. The fragment felt like steel and stone, but when I ate it, it felt like a sip of water. At that time, GLUO smiled, and told me that I would not die anymore, and my illness would slowly improve, until I was completely cured. And the day I recover, this fragment will leave my body. After that, I will be responsible for keeping it. If necessary, I can try to use its power. But the day he comes to see me, I must return this fragment to him. The girl read the diary to this point, and suddenly put down the notebook. She looked up, and when she was not noticing, she was already in tears. GLUO, stupid Anujin has finally waited for this day. I have done everything you asked me to do. If we meet, will you praise me? Anujin closed the notebook and carefully locked it in the box. Then she leaned her head against the wall, and she couldn't stop crying. For 10 years, 10 whole years, she had been hiding abroad according to GLUO's instructions, as if she was suffering from paranoia, hiding back and forth without seeing the sun, and doing everything she could to protect herself. Although she wanted to see him, and wanted to know about his recent situation, she remembered his instructions, and everything about him was invisible, inaudible, and intangible. Until a few days ago, she finally got the news from a junior high school classmate that GLUO took the initiative to ask for a reunion with his junior high school classmates. After 10 years of separation and strangeness, he finally agreed to meet people. To be honest, Anujin didn't know whether GLUO's attitude was to take the initiative to see her. However, she really couldn't wait any longer, and she couldn't bear it any longer. She rushed back to China like crazy, but the GLUO she learned about was a completely stranger. Since that day, he has lost his past. GLUO, what happened on that day? Anujin guessed and speculated countless times, but in the end, no matter how she checked, she could not get any results. It was as if, on that night 10 years ago, what happened? No one saw, no one heard, no one contacted. Knock knock knock. Just when Anujin was lost in her memories, there was a knock on the door of the room. Anujin said come in, and a short-haired girl with a capable temperament walked into the room. Miss Anujin, everything is arranged. You will definitely meet Mr. GLUO tonight. That's good. Thank you for your hard work, Zeon. Anujin motioned the girl next to her to sit down, but Zeon did not mean to move, and still insisted on standing there. Anujin had long been accustomed to Zeon's persistence. She knew that it was actually meaningless for her to force her to sit down, so she started to talk about formal topics. Zeon, I think you have also seen GLUO's information. Do you know that Sukinghan? I know her. She is a companion in the orphanage. Zhiyuan, who was always straightforward, hesitated for a rare moment. She seemed not to want to talk about the orphanage, but when Anujin asked about it, and it was related to GLUO, she had to talk about it. In my memory, Sukinghan was a child who had a lot of ideas, but always forced herself. In the orphanage, she was relatively young, and we all treated her as a sister, but she didn't like to be weak in front of us, and always asked us to call her by her full name. She is not a bad person. Is that so? That's good. Anujin undoubtedly trusted Zhiyuan very much. She also knew that Zhiyuan didn't like to talk much about the orphanage. It was rare for her to say these things today. Although she was very curious, Anujin would not confront Zhiyuan. Although the two looked like master and servant, they had been best friends for so many years. Zeon, since you believe in Sukinghan, then I choose to believe in her too. What she wants to do is very clear. If you want, we can help her. No need. I don't want to get involved in the past. Let them fight for their own affairs. Miss Anujin, we will leave soon. Zeon has been away from her hometown for many years, but this time she came back. She did not feel any intimacy, but a creepy sense of crisis. It was as if the wandering souls of the past were still wandering on this land. When she came back, those wandering souls surrounded her again, and wanted to devour her. Of course, we will go back soon. After all, the 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau does not welcome us. Now the organization is in its rising period, and there is no need to conflict with them. Anujin's life as a superior for 10 years has given her a strong self-control ability. Although she wants to see GLUO very much, the more she wants to see him, the more she acts indifferent. Once she shows a certain tendency, let alone protecting GLUO, he will definitely be in trouble, and the investigation of the 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau is not over yet. After all, she is the queen of the pitch black fire. Chapter 191, Kichuda's Meeting. January 26, 3006, 9:22 in the spacious conference room of the hotel. A dozen worried faces sat on both sides, and in the most important main seat, the pale-faced girl frowned and knocked on the table vigorously. Comrades from the investigation department, we are all colleagues. I also want to say something unpleasant, but I want to know why the queen of the huge organization of the Black Fire, which dominates Western Europe, came to our territory, but you only knocked on my door this morning to tell me. Captain Key, we just found out that the Black Fire has always pursued a neutral policy and has a good attitude towards us. When someone from the other side applies for entry, it is naturally impossible for them to make things difficult. Who knew such a big figure would come? Although the middle-aged man wanted to shirk responsibility, his words were indeed the truth. No one expected that such a big mistake would appear all of a sudden. The Queen of the Black Fire, one of the 8 6th gold level evolvers in the world, can be said to be a nuclear weapon level existence. The organization had specially evaluated that at the 6th gold stage, any evolver, no matter what kind of original talent, would be able to destroy a city. easily, without any damage, without leaving an inch of land, destroy a city. However, with such an existence, who knows what kind of dress-up game he would play. If the other party had not concealed his pomp and used hints to let this giant be discovered, I'm afraid that everyone would not have been kept in the dark. You mean none of you are wrong, it's my fault. Kichudi looked at the other party coldly, causing the middle-aged man to tremble all over, and immediately lowered his head and admitted his mistake. Captain Key, this mistake is indeed a problem of the investigation department. We will report it to the higher authorities without concealment and voluntarily accept the punishment. In order to express his sincerity, the middle-aged man was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. His attitude of directly admitting his mistakes was simply not like someone in the state machine. Everyone knows that the security department is the most difficult to mess with, and in addition to the security department, the assault department is known as the most difficult to mess with. Why? Because the people in the assault class are responsible for frontal combat. They are either reckless or aggressive. They are professional thugs. Moreover, they are powerful and always on the front line. No one from the other 4 classes dares to offend them. If things go wrong, he will beat you into the hospital. You won't die, but you won't be able to get out of bed for half a year. Of course, the other party will definitely be punished, but so what? The people in the assault class have used their lives to protect this land. Without them, who will fight against the growing number of wild beasts? I hope you can do a good job of self-examination, so that we don't have to take the blame when someone in our assault class dies in the end. Kichudi came out of the sea of corpses. She is not even half the age of the middle-aged man, but when she stared at the other party, the middle-aged man was like a mouse seeing a cat, and he was so scared that he almost shrank into a ball. In short, everyone here is already the head of the Changlin City Security Bureau. Since the incident has happened, we must find a way to face it. Kichudi came from the capital after all. Although she was on a special mission, there was also the element of patrolling the place. None of these people here are not afraid. After all, the existence of evolvers is too different from ordinary people. Normal people as leaders will definitely think about how to make money and get promoted, but for powerful evolvers, they don't have much desire for power and money. What they want is more power. And Kichudi, who is called Zujet, is said to be the best among them. He is a desperate fighting maniac who kills people, and is also cruel to himself. He must not be provoked. And Eugen, you just make good arrangements here, and don't fall behind in surveillance, but don't be too obvious. Forget it, don't try to show off. You are an evolver of the 6th gold level. What can you do to hide it from others? Just choose an accompanying person. Kichudi pondered for a moment, turned over the information in front of him, looked at it carefully for a while, and suddenly smiled. This Eugen seems to be a collateral branch of the Yin family. Although her bloodline is almost gone, she can be considered a distant relative of Nan. Captain Key. Well, you guys go find Nan right now, make some arrangements for her, let her join the security bureau, and then send her to Eugen to accompany her around Changlin City. After Kichudi finished this order, he nodded with satisfaction. He was thinking about how to express this side's goodwill. Is there anything more appropriate than this? Let your relative accompany you directly. What a great care. What a strong trust. Okay, I'll arrange it later. Faced with Kichudi's strong attitude, no one in the room dared to refute, and could only respond to Kichudi's order. By the way, communicate with Zinki Biopharmaceuticals. You guys quickly changed someone. Today, they found me, and said that the person we arranged was not stable and almost ruined the whole plan. Kichudi's words were not heavy, but there was something revealed in them, which scared everyone in the room. Although they knew there was a problem, the people in the back didn't know what was going on. The people closest to them knew it. They nodded without hesitation and immediately started to clean up their house. Everyone here knows our rules. You have already known the confidential operation. Now put your mobile phones and communication items on the table, and keep your hands away. In addition, no one needs to go home these days, so work hard. Kichudi looked at the situation, that was quickly controlled and nodded with satisfaction. This is pretty good. The security bureau is not like other departments. If you want to get involved, you will be gone. To be honest, Kichudi herself felt a little confused at first. People like Werewolf Sapien ran to Changlin City to join in the fun, and other monsters also hid. It was not until last night that the headquarters sent a message that Kichudi understood what was going on. This trip, she is really destined to be busy. Everyone, this is a crisis, but also an opportunity. The Queen of the Dark Flame came so suddenly, she must have her own purpose. But now it seems that she has no intention of conflicting with us. We can be on guard, but we can't be too rude. On the other hand, Kichudi put the documents away, knocked on the table twice, and swept his eyes over everyone present. The attitude expressed was self-evident. Some lawless people must be punished. I have applied for support from the headquarters. The support will arrive by tomorrow morning at the latest. Chapter 192, Tang Bamboo Slips. January 26th, 3006, 9:53. In an office full of ancient style, a young man with bright eyes sat on a wooden chair with a calm expression, his fingers dipped in water, slowly writing the word LUO on the table, over and over again. Beside the young man, a petite woman stood by the side with a pen. She watched the young man continue to write lines of characters, and still refused to move her eyes away when she saw the whole picture collapse. Fook, you seem to be very dissatisfied with my arrangement. Why, don't you want to say it? Tang Zujian, if this is the best choice you see, I have no objection. Although Fook said that she had no objection, the prefix in her sentence had already expressed her dissatisfaction. When Tang Zujian heard what Fook said, she was not angry, but smiled and shook her head. Fook, you know, I won't hide anything from you. The reason why I allowed Zooting to intervene is nothing more than wanting to get the result of one thing. Tang Zujian suddenly stopped what he was doing. He raised his hand. Before he could take out a tissue to wipe his hand, Fook had come over and wiped his fingers with a handkerchief. Is this matter more important than catching Su Qinghan? Her ability has already posed a threat to you. Fook also became serious at this time. When she was in the orphanage, she was the oldest among all the children, and was responsible for taking care of all the children. Although so many years have passed, she is still as young as a girl, but she is everyone's sister, and knows every child. As a sister, of course she likes every brother and sister to be well, but now, Su Qinghan has crossed the line. Shu King died. She just died of weakness like a deep sleep forever. No disease could be found, and no rescue could be done. She was like Sleeping Beauty, and never woke up again. The 32 children in the orphanage were all like family members, but now, Su Qinghan has gone completely crazy. She doesn't know what she is doing at all. She is killing her own relatives. Shu King's death showed that Su Qinghan had lost all friendship. She was reckless. As long as she had the chance, she would kill everyone without any scruples. The most important person, Tang Zujian, was her most important target. Tang Zujian, don't be conceited. Su Qinghan's original talent is likely to have the ability of time and space. It's okay if she's alone now. If she joins any force, then everything will be too late. Fook, don't worry. I understand. I understand. Tang Zujian looked at the anxious Fook and smiled. Fook, who had always been kind to others, now showed this expression. Obviously, she was really worried about him, very worried. Shu King's death is over. This is also my mistake. I would let her go, just to pass on a message. I didn't expect that she would choose to fight directly. Tang Zujian was also very sad about Shu King's death, but after the sadness, there was a huge confusion and fear. It was precisely to solve this doubt that Tang Zujian created the current situation. His ability is called Great Dream World, which means that when he sleeps, he will experience the future derived from this world, which is somewhat similar to foreknowledge and time travel, but it is different from both. Because the future he experienced is illusory, but also real. As long as he wakes up and makes the same decision as in the dream, the result will be the same. Of course, it is not that there are no anomalies. For example, Su Qinghan, he relied on his foresight of the future to lay a net several times, but every time, Su Qinghan was able to escape. After several attacks, Tang Zujian was basically certain that Su Qinghan's ability was related to time. After all, the final results of various plans are too abnormal. Fook, what I really care about is not the result of this incident, but I met a person when I had a foresight dream some time ago. What Tang Yujian experienced in his dream was the future of this world. If the timeline did not change, then this would be the answer. However, that day, Tang Yujian saw the direction of chaos. Because of the interference of a certain person, the entire timeline was wrong. And that person, Tang Yujian, did not know his name, only knew there was a Reluo in his name. Tang Yujian picked up the pen on the table and casually drew something on the paper. Fuke stared at it for a long time before he could see that it seemed to be a sketch of a person, but there were no facial features on the face, only a pair of eyes that were unforgettable at first sight. I still don't know who this person is, but I'm sure that he also has the ability to interfere with the timeline, and he is on Su Qinghen's side. You haven't seen the true face of that person? Fuke really didn't expect that Tang Yujian would not care about life and death in his dream, and couldn't be sure who this person was. No, every time I tried to ambush and capture Su Qinghen recently, that person would definitely appear. He was wearing a Renuo mask, and I could only see his eyes. Tang Yujian's face darkened when he thought of this. He was sure that the person's original talent was extremely special and extremely domineering. Because every time that person touched him, the great dream world would end completely. He would wake up from his deep sleep, and he would have difficulty falling asleep for a day or two. After several attempts, Tang Yujian had completely given up his previous idea. He decided to temporarily withdraw his hands and feet and let others try the water first. Money is just a number to him. If he can use a sum of money to buy the help he needs, it would be great. So, you hired Zhuting? Let her try to capture Su Qinghen and expose the hidden person? Yes, it's that simple. Tang Yujian would never hide anything from Fuke, but sometimes, as long as she didn't ask, he wouldn't say so much. Fuke, don't think I'm making a fuss or being overly sensitive. That person, the person hiding in the dark, is really worth it for us to do this. Rather than explaining something to Fuke, Tang Yujian was repeating his own beliefs. Su Qinghen can live, but that person must die. Because that person, in a dream, once killed him and also killed Fuke. You know, he himself is a blue steel evolver, and Fuke is a silver evolver. Not to mention ordinary people, even in the level of evolvers, Fuke is at the top of the pyramid. But such a Fuke was killed by that person, killed by an unknown method. For this reason, he must be careful, and would rather fail than get involved. Tang Yujian has always had a feeling that that person is very important. As long as they find him, their long cherished wish for so many years may be able to move forward one step. Chapter 193, Awkward. If I can make your long cherished wish move forward one step, then everything I have done will be worth it. Luo put his elbow on the windowsill, his palm supporting his cheek. His eyes fell on the sleeping Su Qinghen, his expression full of tenderness. Last night, Su Qinghen had not slept all night. When he returned home late at night, the girl knocked on the door and entered the house, and then the two sat by the windowsill and talked a lot. Although Su Qinghen thought she had concealed it well, Luo still felt Su Qinghen's intention to leave from her words. She now no longer concealed her affection, trust, and concern for him. In her heart, Luo was just a fellow traveler she met on her journey. Although they were very happy during this time together, they had to separate after all and embark on their own worlds and lives. In a person's life, you will meet many people, but only a few can accompany you to the end. In the endless reincarnation, Su Qinghen had already understood this truth. She thought she had done it, but when she sat with Luo in front of the window and talked about the past and the future, her heart couldn't help but ache. She was really leaving, and she would never see him again. The tacit understanding and friendship between them were broken and could never be pieced together again. Perhaps it was because of this kind of parting thoughts that Su Qinghen said a lot to Luo, and even a lot of things. She wanted to keep it secret, but under Luo's calm tone, she couldn't help but say more. Alas, Luo reached out to touch Su Qinghen's cheek, but when his palm was in the air, he still held back and stopped. Su Qinghen was already asleep. There was no need to disturb her good dream. Looking at Su Qinghen's sleeping face, Luo felt a little proud. If it was an ordinary person, would Su Qinghen sleep so defenselessly? Of course, GLUO was sure that Su King-hun definitely had a backhand and preparation. If he dared to wake her up with his hands and feet, then what would greet him next would definitely be a tragic ending. After watching for a while, GLUO walked out of the room quietly, then pushed the door and left the house. This is a rare opportunity. Both of them are here. GLUO wants to cook a meal for Su King-hun. What a fool. After GLUO left, Su King-hun slowly opened her eyes. She was a light sleeper and would wake up at the slightest movement. But today, GLUO had to go out to wake her up. Su King-hun couldn't tell why. It was as if she was especially at ease with GLUO and didn't need to be on guard at all times. It's a pity that you are a passerby. Su King-hun lay on the windowsill, watching GLUO walk through the path, his figure disappearing in the distance. The girl felt a little uncomfortable and relieved. No matter how she whitewashed it, she had already concluded that she had deceived him and used him. GLUO obviously didn't need to get involved in all this. He could live a good and free life. But for her, he would laugh foolishly, nod heavily in agreement, and finally fulfill the promise regardless of his life. That's it. That's good. Su King-hun took out a bank card and a folded letter from his pocket and put them under GLUO's pillow. Last night, GLUO thought she couldn't sleep because of worry, so she came to chat with him. But in fact, there were only useless furniture and sundries left in her house. Today, she will go out with GLUO, and GLUO will come back, but she won't. In order to survive, she has been hiding here and there for the past few years, and the few months here are already a long time. Now, she is leaving again, and the only thanks she can give is a goodbye and some money. What will he do today? Su King-hun shrank back a little bored, slowly closed her eyes, and fell into memories and dreams. I don't know how long it took. When Su King-hun heard the door open, she opened her eyes, and the bright sun pierced her eyes. Su King-hun hurriedly covered her eyes, and when he got up, GLUO had walked into the kitchen from the door and put the ingredients in place. Su King-hun, I'll treat you to a big meal today. GLUO reached out and took off his thick down jacket. The frost on his head began to melt slowly. He put a lot of food on the table and even heard the sound of fluttering. Did you bring back a live fish? Well, this kind of fish tastes best when it's put into the pot directly after being killed, so I didn't ask him to gut and scale it. I'll do it myself. GLUO changed into slippers at this time and put the purchased ingredients in different categories. Su King-hun did not interfere with his arrangement, but after everything was arranged, the girl sat on the chair and prepared to help pick the vegetables. GLUO, there are only two of us. Don't cook so much. It's okay, today is a good day. It's worth celebrating. GLUO didn't say how good the day was, so Su King-hun didn't ask. In her heart, she felt that GLUO also felt the separation and wanted to have a farewell dinner. Okay, the new year is coming soon. Let's celebrate together. Su King-hun has been so busy lately that she has forgotten that the new year is coming. Although GLUO remembered it in his heart, he didn't prepare too much. He just planned to buy more things when the day comes. When you celebrate the new year alone, it is always cold and bleak. It's not just loneliness and negative emotions, but on a night with fireworks all over the sky, you look up and see thousands of lights shining brightly and warmly, but you are sitting alone at the table with no one to talk to. That feeling is really terrible. It won't kill you, but it will make you lonely to the bone. Fortunately, this year, GLUO also has someone to accompany him. He bought so many dishes today, and he actually has the idea of trying them. Later, he wants to see what dishes Su King-hun eats more, and when the new year comes, he will arrange them for her. When you do something for others, it will be very different. Just a change in your state of mind brings a completely different temperament. Su King-hun was sitting at the dining table, picking a bunch of leeks. GLUO in the kitchen suddenly called her name. The girl walked in, handed GLUO a pair of scissors, and helped him open a bag. The kitchen of the 3-bedroom and 1 living room is very large, and GLUO and Su King-hun are not crowded inside. Su King-hun was going to go back after handing over the scissors, but seeing GLUO's serious look, the girl stood by and looked at him quietly. The sun shone in from the window. GLUO bathed in the sun and played a serious game with the ingredients. At this time, GLUO was no longer as casual and lazy as usual. He was like a chef preparing a banquet. professional and handsome. If you think about it again, all he did was for himself, which makes people feel warm in their hearts. GLUO, if one day I die, will you be sad? Chapter 194, Denial. You died? I probably won't be sad, but I will blame you. GLUO held a half-peeled potato in his hand and answered in a strange way. Sukinghan looked at him and blinked, vaguely grasping the meaning of GLUO's words. Don't guess. I must have died before you died. I will blame you for coming too early, but I will definitely be happy in my heart. GLUO showed a wicked smile on his face. He said it as a joke, but Sukinghan suddenly lowered his eyelids when listening to him, and couldn't say anything. Sukinghan, do you want more vinegar for the spicy and sour potato shreds? No. No, no, let's add more. Sukinghan answered GLUO's words. At first, she didn't want to trouble GLUO, but after she finished speaking, she realized that she didn't need to do so, so she changed her answer. Okay, you like more vinegar, I like more chili. Perfect. GLUO knew that Sukinghan was worried, but he couldn't say much. Everything was reflected in his actions. Before he dies, she will never die. Although this kind of word sounds a bit rash, GLUO is indeed carrying it out. If the cost of death rewind is destined, then GLUO will choose to be the one to bear it. Sukinghan walked into the kitchen, actually wanting to help GLUO, but at this time, she leaned on the doorframe, watching GLUO's busy figure, and suddenly, her heart was very warm. So, she did not go to help, but stood there, watching GLUO's busyness and management, and was unwilling to let time pass too quickly. However, time is something that cannot be retained after all. In Sukinghan's trance, GLUO's figure was busy back and forth in the kitchen, making a table of sumptuous meals. It was obviously breakfast, but when the meal was ready, it was almost noon. The two sat at the table, with the bowls and chopsticks neatly placed. Sukinghan stretched out her hand, and suddenly she couldn't bear to pick up the chopsticks. When she picked up the chopsticks, it meant that the meal was about to begin, and with a beginning, it would soon end. After this meal, there were twists and turns. One wrong step would lead to death. If they kept doing it right, it would be a separation. Haha. I rarely cooked so many dishes today. Do you want to drink some wine? GLUO actually wanted to laugh. He wanted to laugh more freely, and wanted to give Sukinghan the impression that he was a person who did not need her to worry about. However, when the two sat at the dinner table and the countdown to their separation began, GLUO inexplicably did not know what to say. What could he say? For the first time, GLUO hated himself for hiding his identity. He concealed everything from Sukinghan and naturally enjoyed the feeling of playing the pig and eating the tiger as a peeper. However, this also meant that in Sukinghan's heart, he had never put him in the position of a companion. She wanted to protect him, so she avoided him even more. Okay, it's rare that I want to drink too. Sukinghan had developed the habit of not drinking after years of fleeing, but today, she sat in front of GLUO, and suddenly felt very uncomfortable. Parting is always sad, and it is even more painful when it is a farewell forever, but the truth cannot be said. Okay, let's drink red wine and mix it with drinks. GLUO took out the stock that he prepared for Christmas, but did not drink, and did not have any high-end sobering wine. He poured it directly into the cup, and added half of the carbonated drink. It's a bit like grape drink. Your wine is quite expensive. Sukinghan took a sip and actually tasted something different. GLUO poured himself a sip and tasted it, but he didn't feel anything. This bottle of wine is enough for my rent for 1 or 2 years. I asked someone to buy it. How did you taste it? Expensive. Red wine. When I was in the orphanage, our mother especially liked to drink red wine, and taught us a lot of relevant knowledge. Sukinghan rarely mentioned the past to others, but in this atmosphere, she didn't want to deceive GLUO, so she talked about some long-standing topics. That's really good. Anyway, I don't understand this at all. It was the first time that GLUO heard Sukinghan talk about her self-examination. He looked at Sukinghan's depressed mood and suddenly remembered the photos he had seen on her mobile phone. There were 32 children, surrounding a very beautiful woman. Sukinghan was also in it at that time. To be honest, I have been basically alone all this way. I seem to have fallen on my head. Anyway, when I was in the second grade of junior high school, I woke up and my previous memories were in disarray. Basically, they were all gone. GLUO pointed to his head and made a stirring motion. When he woke up that year, he suddenly awakened his superpowers, but the side effects were also obvious. All his past memories were shattered into pieces, the kind that could not be pieced together. Anyway, I don't have any memory about my parents, but I seem to have had an adoptive mother, but she disappeared. I don't remember what she looked like, and I don't know where she went. At the time, she should have been counted as a missing person, but after so many years, she is probably dead. I was also a naughty kid back then. Anyway, I felt that I was living very freely alone, so I postponed all the plans. But later I met an aunt named Jiang. She was a really nice person and had a very special personality. After she died, I traveled all over the country and wandered around for so many years, but I never met anyone like her again. Never again. GLUO raised his glass and clinked his glass with Sukinghan while chatting. Then he tilted his head back and drank it all in one gulp. There was no spiciness of wine in his throat, but there was the numbness of carbonated drinks. Until today, I still feel guilty when I think of it occasionally. I failed her expectations and didn't take good care of her child. GLUO, for this kind of thing, just do your best. No one is taken for granted, and it's not so hard to lose. After Sukinghan and GLUO clinked glasses, they drank in small sips, but she drank very frequently, and soon the glass was empty. No, I think some people really can't be lost. GLUO rarely denied Sukinghan's words, but at this time, he denied Sukinghan's idea without hesitation. The girl raised her head and looked at GLUO's serious eyes. Her eyelashes trembled, but she nodded. Maybe, you are right. Haha, there is no right or wrong, it's just everyone's persistence. GLUO's attitude was adjusted, and the atmosphere eased again. Then he began to pour wine, and Sukinghan also picked up the chopsticks and began to pick up the dishes. It was a farewell meal. There was no confession of feelings or attempt to save the relationship. GLUO and Sukinghan just ate happily and talked happily. At least, neither of them regretted meeting each other. Chapter 195, Leaving. GLUO and Sukinghan had a meal, eating, drinking, chatting, and before they knew it, they had finished all the food and wine. Haha, we two are good eaters. We've finished it all. GLUO is the kind of person who blushes easily when drinking. In fact, he is not drunk at all, but his cheeks are red, and he looks like he is drunk. Sukinghan's face is just slightly red, and she looks less solemn and cold than usual. She looks inexplicably gentle and lovely. The girl squinted her eyes and was a little tipsy. GLUO, you must not get involved in today's affairs. Just help me do a small thing. What is it? You have been so mysterious for so many days, and you won't tell me when I ask you. GLUO and Sukinghan have been together for a long time, and they no longer have the uneasiness they had before, especially Sukinghan's current drunken appearance, which makes people let go of their restraint. It's just a small bottle. Sukinghan took out a very small glass bottle from his pocket. It looked a bit like a bottle of perfume, but the bottle was filled with blood. Is this your blood? GLUO is now very familiar with blood. He can tell at a glance what Sukinghan added to the blood to make it sticky and look a bit like glue. Well, there are a lot of other things in it. Sukinghan did not lie to GLUO. She handed the bottle to him and signaled him not to open it. Just take this bottle and get close to the golden cup, just about 5 meters away. If nothing happens, don't do anything and just attend your class reunion. If there is a reaction, what is it? GLUO held the glass bottle in his hand and watched the blood in the bottle flow slowly. Sukinghan sat opposite GLUO, looking at him with a surprised face, and suddenly felt a hope that she had never had before, that the golden cup was fake. GLUO, if you get within 5 meters of the golden cup, the blood in the bottle starts to heat up. You must not show any abnormality. Just stay for about a minute, then leave immediately. Find a chance and notify me. Okay, if it's just a fever, it won't be exposed. GLUO didn't understand the reason for this, but Sukinghan obviously knew it. She looked at GLUO very seriously and stared at GLUO until he became serious. GLUO, I'm really not kidding. You have to remember, as long as you are within 5 meters, 1 minute, leave immediately, don't stay longer. Understood, I can do it. GLUO put a small bottle of blood in his pocket and nodded heavily. Sukinghan's clenched palm slowly loosened. She reached out to take the tissue next to her and wiped the water stains in front of her. GLUO, have you heard about Mengwu? Mengwu? What happened to him recently? To be honest, GLUO really didn't pay attention to what happened to Mengwu. He had created a scene at that time, just to make Mengwu uncomfortable. He didn't have time to tangle with him and subdue Kao Jianyan by the way. As for whether he could really overthrow Mengwu, GLUO really didn't care and didn't have such extravagant hopes. Mengwu and a powerful boss have started a full-scale war, which is a big trouble. Sukinghan didn't have a happy expression on her face. In her opinion, this kind of thing was actually just a trivial matter. As for why Sukinghan said this to GLUO at this time, I'm afraid no one knows except Sukinghan. It is said that the boss was invited by him to the hotel for negotiations, but Mengwu ambushed him halfway and almost killed him. This completely angered the other party and he will not stop until his death. Mengwu is good. He has a big appetite and is ruthless. GLUO's surprise and curiosity were just right. Then he looked gloating and didn't seem to have any other thoughts. Yeah, it's a good thing that he suffered. As for the specific reasons, there is no need to care. Sukinghan nodded with relief. Then she knocked on the table twice, propped up the table, and stood up from the chair. GLUO, I should go. Why are you in such a hurry? Sit for a while. GLUO turned his head and looked at the clock. He found that it was only 11 o'clock. The party was to start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He still had a lot of time. No, there are still things to arrange. Take the communicator I gave you before, and you sit when no one is around. Sukinghan left the table, and GLUO followed immediately. The girl waved her hand to indicate that GLUO didn't need to see her off. She took clothes from the hanger and put them on while instructing GLUO. GLUO, remember, don't do anything extra. Just confirm it according to my method, and tell me the situation. If the blood in the bottle really evaporates, you must not attend the class reunion again. No matter what, you must leave immediately. No matter what the plan turns out, GLUO, you can leave the hotel and go home directly. Don't worry about me, and don't reveal my existence. You must remember that no matter what happens today, it has nothing to do with you. Sukinghan said it very seriously, and GLUO nodded to indicate that he had written it down. Of course, GLUO didn't really answer Sukinghan, he just nodded. Sukinghan, are you alone tonight? What's wrong? Do you want to attend, too? Sukinghan thought GLUO wanted to follow her, and immediately became serious. She was not afraid of GLUO's ability, but she was afraid that GLUO would not act according to the agreement, and cause things to completely collapse. No, I just want to say, be careful. GLUO originally wanted to test whether Sukinghan had any helpers, but seeing Sukinghan's attitude, GLUO knew without guessing that she was alone again. Don't worry, I will. Sukinghan walked to the door and put on her shoes. She stood in front of GLUO. The down jacket on her body was very thick and looked warm. GLUO, it's rare for you to attend a class reunion. Don't always look so worried. Have a good chat with your friends. This is a bit regrettable. I don't have any friends to talk to. GLUO was not ashamed, but proud of it. Sukinghan raised his hand and patted him on the shoulder, and then, the girl turned around and walked out of the door. GLUO watched Sukinghan gradually go away, and the faint smell of alcohol on his body had completely dissipated. If he could choose, GLUO would be willing to accompany Sukinghan like this every day. In the past, it was hard for him to imagine that there was actually someone who could make him worry about him and risk his life for him. Although it was a bit strange to do so, in the contact with Sukinghan, GLUO still took over the death rewind. This time, just as GLUO said in his oath, before he died, he would never let her get hurt. At this time, looking at Sukinghan who was going away, GLUO completely untied the last tangle. If necessary, GLUO is willing to expose his identity as an evolver. Chapter 196, Tried Hard. In many cases, people's determination is actually a choice, a determination to abandon certain things and resolutely choose certain endings. GLUO's current situation does not allow him to look ahead and behind. Things are impossible to be perfect. He can only sacrifice the car to save the king, or cut off his arm to survive. If it were the GLUO in the past, he would definitely not be as entangled as he is now. At that time, he was an irritable middle school boy. He never looked ahead and behind when encountering things. No matter how bad the situation was, no matter how miserable his final ending was, as long as he didn't let the enemy have an easy life, he would do anything. This temper also made GLUO have no friends in junior high school, but everyone remembered him. Of course. A large part of them were beaten by GLUO. GLUO knew that he was an evolver, but others didn't know. There were a lot of gossips behind him, and GLUO was very irritable, so the usual result was beating people. Under absolute violence, gossip did decrease, but GLUO's reputation was completely ruined. Everyone avoided him. Throughout the second half of his junior high school career, GLUO didn't have a single friend. The only person who can chat is Dangoi, because this kid has a problem with his brain. He has admired heroes since he was a child, so since GLUO is so good at fighting, he often sticks to him. However, in that era, there was no word licking dog, which could not describe the situation at that time. It can only be said that children all like to follow behind the powerful people. But as they get older, everyone's self-awareness awakens. They will not only change their style, but many times, they will also despise their former selves, even denying their past selves to prove that they have matured. This kind of emotion is probably also possessed by Dangoi. When he was in junior high school, he was a little fat, his studies were also poor, and his temper was a little careless, and he was very unwelcome. But now, everyone has entered society. Dangoi's family owns hundreds of millions of industrial companies. After college, he helped his father manage the family property. In terms of momentum, he has already had the prototype of a successful life. When a person loses weight and becomes more confident, his appearance will improve. Moreover, Dangoi specially prepared knee bumps for the class reunion. Wearing these handmade knee bumps, which cost the price of a house, makes him particularly eye-catching. GLUO, you are finally here. After so many years, I finally see you. Dangoi was immediately excited when he saw GLUO's appearance. He even went down a few steps and deliberately condescended to greet GLUO. Long time no see. GLUO didn't pay much attention to Dangoi's false enthusiasm. He just stretched out his hand and shook hands with Dangoi casually. His attitude was not arrogant, but extremely cold. Haha, long time no see. Dangoi didn't expect that GLUO would still have this attitude when he saw him now, but Dangoi was not angry. Instead, he enthusiastically invited GLUO to go into the house. To be honest, after so many years, he had long forgotten the trivial things of his childhood. If an Eugene, who was abroad, hadn't asked about GLUO every year, how could he miss GLUO? Others don't know, but Dangoi had a crush on a Eugene back then. After she went abroad, he still paid attention to her. It was not a special surveillance, but he often checked in. If you don't know, you don't know. Once you know, Dangoi is completely shocked. An Eugene, who was not outstanding in China, took off directly abroad. In just 3 years, she completed her studies from junior high school to university, and then she started her own business. In just a few years, her beauty products became popular all over the world. Later, she acquired the world's largest cosmetics company and became a behemoth with the momentum of swallowing up. And this is just the beginning. After completing the integration of the cosmetics industry, An Eugene began to acquire land and entered the construction industry. At the same time, finance, media, catering, and various industries went hand in hand. According to normal reason, such a stupid development strategy should be doomed to fail, but she succeeded, and it was unbelievable. 10 years later, An Eugene became the youngest count at the age of 23. In Western Europe, Countess refers specifically to her. Even many people call her the Queen. Such An Eugene has always been paying attention to GLUO. Dangoi will of course keep an eye on GLUO. The gap between his status and Anujin's is too big, and he no longer has those wishful thinking. Now, all Dangoi wants is to connect with Anujin and go international, and this opportunity must be GLUO. One day a few years ago, Dangoi suddenly received a call from Anujin, saying that she wanted to organize a reunion of junior high school classmates. Dangoi was of course ecstatic when he heard it. At that junior high school reunion, Dangoi put on a huge show and spent millions, but unfortunately, Anujin did not come, but just gave him 5 million as an apology. Compared with the cost, 4 times the profit is indeed good, but for Dangoi, being able to connect with Anujin is something that hundreds of millions can't exchange for. The next year, Anujin talked about the junior high school reunion again. Dangoi learned a lot this time. He has realized that the reason why Anujin did not come was that she had something to do as an excuse. The real reason must be that she did not need to come. So, Dangoi specifically pointed out 2 people who had a bad relationship with Anujin, saying that they should not come, but Anujin replied that it was not good to have a junior high school reunion without all the people. Well, Anujin's simple not good, but in Dangoi's ears, it sounded like the leader's biggest instruction. With the direction of his efforts, Dangoi was full of energy. At that party, he invited everyone except GLUO. Even those who were abroad, he paid for them to come. But at that time, GLUO was not only missing, but could be described as having no news. At that time, Dangoi wasted a lot of effort, which could really be regarded as a history of blood and tears. He finally got GLUO's contact number, but the result, no words are needed. So, that year, Anujin still didn't come, but just gave another 5 million. Dangoi didn't understand what was going on now. He was a fool. In the 3rd year, without Anujin's explanation, Dangoi even took a plane to find GLUO, but unfortunately, GLUO had just changed his job at that time, and he didn't find him. In the subsequent phone call, Dangoi directly wanted to give GLUO 1 million yuan, just to let him attend a class reunion, but GLUO just didn't come. He is different from others after all. That time, Dangoi really saw the peculiarity of GLUO. He tried his best, but couldn't convince GLUO. He just didn't come. So, the result of the 3rd year was the same as above. In other words, the result has always been the same in the following years, until today. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197, To Kinds of People. No one could have imagined, no one could understand, when Dangoi received a call from GLUO, saying that he wanted to attend the junior high school reunion, how excited and ecstatic Dangoi was. That night, Dangoi got drunk, and the next day he began to arrange the venue and contact all the classmates. For this, he didn't care how much money he spent. When everything was done, in order not to let GLUO get suspicious and scare GLUO away again, Dangoi called GLUO. His emotions were all pretended, and the flow of words went through dozens of times. In the end, of course, everything went well. However, joy turns to sorrow. When Dangoi couldn't wait to contact Anujin, he got another remittance of 5 million, because Anujin couldn't come, because of something important. From heaven to hell, this huge gap almost made Dangoi's emotions collapse, but fortunately, everything he did was meaningful. After all, earning 4 million, compared to the effort, it was simply a lot of money. In order to make this money in the future, Dangoi certainly would not neglect GLUO, so although he felt very uncomfortable, his expression was still enthusiastic and sincere. GLUO didn't feel it on the phone, but now when he saw Dangoi, he immediately felt his scalp tingling. To be honest, how could this guy become like this? He wasn't such a licker in junior high school. His attitude towards him is too good. So good that it is obvious that he has some ulterior motive. But fortunately, Dangoi didn't follow him all the time. After leading him to his seat, he chatted with him for a few more words, and then went out to greet other classmates. Apart from anything else, For so many years, every year's class reunion has been organized by Dangoi. Maybe he has other thoughts, but it is precisely because he has other thoughts that he has done so well. For example, now, GLUO was arranged to the most important main table. He glanced around. Wow, it was more thoughtful than the wedding banquet. Apart from anything else, if it cost money, it might not be possible to get it for 5,000 yuan per table. There were more than 50 people in total, and 6 tables were set up, occupying a huge hall. The 6 tables were placed slightly in the back, surrounded by a circle of self-service cakes and drinks, and in the front, there was a whole ancient-style orchestra. Because the class reunion had not started yet, the orchestra members were now tuning their instruments. The waiters were also carefully selected, and had a very good service attitude. GLUO took a few melon seeds on the table and ate them. He actually regretted not coming here before. Dangoi, this kid, is really good. This class reunion must have cost a lot of money. He didn't even ask for money. He treated everyone. This is the same every year. Who sponsored him? There was no advertisement. Just when GLUO was looking around, suddenly someone came from behind, and even deliberately lightened his footsteps, as if he wanted to sneak attack GLUO. At that moment, GLUO's mind was startled, and he was even ready to take the initiative. However, that person just came over and patted GLUO on the shoulder with the intention of scaring GLUO. Hey GLUO. Who? GLUO pretended to be frightened and trembled, but in fact, GLUO's eyes turned immediately and scanned the person's body. It can be confirmed that he did not carry any weapons, his physical fitness was average, and he was not a person who practiced martial arts for many years, so he was not dangerous. GLUO, you are really good. It's me Qiyu Chengai. Qiyu Chengai pretended to be very friendly, but his attitude was actually average. GLUO nodded, without even smiling. It turned out to be Qiyu Chengai. I don't remember. Of course, it is definitely impossible to say that I have completely forgotten. Anyway, GLUO remembered that Qiyu Chengai liked to make a fuss when he was in junior high school. He watched too many young and dangerous people and acted like a millionaire all day long. Later, he was severely beaten by GLUO and became completely honest. However, 10 years have passed, and Qiyu Chengai seems to have developed well. Anyway, compared with GLUO, he is definitely better. Qiyu Chengai also wore a suit, but he didn't wear a tie. He was fiddling with a car key in his hand. It looked like a high-end car at a glance. If this were a novel, Qiyu Chengai would be a complete villain, and he came here to get slapped in the face by GLUO's pretense. However, this is reality, and what's more realistic is that since entering society, there have been more and more such people at every class reunion. The more obscure a person is in junior high school, the more he wants to torment himself, so as to tell everyone that things may change over time, and don't bully the poor young people. I'm up now. You have to change your attitude towards me, speak politely to me, and I can protect you. Qiyu Chengai came to see GLUO, of course, for a purpose, but GLUO didn't even look at him. He just picked up a handful of melon seeds and started cracking them. Qiyu Chengai looked at GLUO's indifferent attitude, and for a moment he even doubted whether he had come to the wrong place. This GLUO, why doesn't he take the usual path? I haven't seen my classmates for so long, and you have this attitude? GLUO, I'm not saying anything bad about you, but your temper hasn't changed at all. Qiyu Chengai was a little embarrassed when he saw GLUO didn't invite him to sit down and didn't pay attention to him. But he felt embarrassed to leave directly, so he sat next to GLUO and started to speak in a sarcastic tone. If I had a temper, I would have beaten you to death in junior high school. Now, I won't give you the opportunity to sit here and talk nonsense. GLUO spit out the melon seed shells and spoke in a very poisonous tone. Qiyu Chengai was pretending to smile, but he didn't expect GLUO to be so cruel, and he was directly broken. GLUO, I haven't seen you for so many years. You come up with this attitude. You are too much. I'm too much. What can you do? GLUO was unhappy today. He came here for something important. Qiyu Chengai, a fool with no eyebrows and eyes, came up to harass him. Isn't this asking for a beating? You, how old are you, and you still want to fight? Qiu Chengai actually wanted to ridicule Gluo a few words, and he didn't really intend to fight with Gluo. The main thing is that Gluo is too fierce in fighting. In junior high school, no matter whether it was a tough guy in the school or a scoundrel outside the school, Gluo beat them so badly that no matter how many people came, it was useless. The more people came, the worse they were beaten. Anyway, after so many years, Qiu Chengai was still a little scared when he saw Gluo again. Just that one time, he was psychologically traumatized. So Qiu Chengai came to see Gluo, in fact, to break his inner demon, but he didn't expect that Gluo was so unethical and looked like he was going to fight. Humph. It really hasn't changed at all. Qiu Chengai looked at Gluo's casual but dangerous eyes, and his whole momentum had waned. He pretended to snort, left the chair, and went directly back to the original table. Obviously, Qiu Chengai wanted to spread the conversation with Gluo just now, so that Gluo's reputation would be completely stinky. Of course, he didn't dare to speak loudly, nor did he dare to do it too obviously. He was a gentleman, and he was afraid that Gluo would beat him. Chapter 198, The Hidden One. I'm really getting more and more stuck. Gluo didn't care about people like Qiu Chengai at all. He couldn't sew up someone else's mouth. Who cares? Gluo chewed melon seeds and looked down at the time. His expression immediately frowned. Are these people stuck in a traffic jam? Why don't they have a sense of time? They were supposed to be there at 3 o'clock. Gluo even tried to time it and arrived at 2:40. But now he looked around. Wow, there were more than 60 people, but only a dozen of them came. What's even more awkward is that I don't know what Qiu Chengai was thinking. He actually arranged Gluo to sit in the main seat. You know, this position is usually occupied by teachers. Gluo now regretted a little. Why did he forget to ask the teacher if he was coming? When he saw Dangoi later, he would ask him to change his seat. No, change now. Gluo felt that the eyes around him were a little bit piercing. He thought he wouldn't care, but a group of junior high school classmates, knowing your dark history in the second year of junior high school, really treated you differently from ordinary strangers. Look, I haven't seen a handsome guy before. Gluo decided to retreat temporarily. He took out his mobile phone from his pocket, rubbed the screen, pretended to make a call, and walked out of the hall. However, at this time, Dangoi, who was supposed to be the receptionist, was completely missing. He asked the waiter, but no one knew where he was. Gluo had no choice but to go into the bathroom and change the time node, but he didn't expect that as soon as Gluo entered the bathroom, he heard Dangoi's familiar voice. Leo Wang. How did you arrange it? How many invitations to the auction have been sent out? Why is the parking lot full? A bunch of my classmates are blocking the other end of the street. Find a way quickly to stop them from blocking us. Just tell the guest that there is no space left and ask him to park somewhere else. My classmates have to make arrangements. Also, Leo Wang, I don't want to get involved in the secret auction you and my dad are holding, but what's going on with you? Why do you have to display the auction items for 3 hours before the auction? It's so much trouble. Dangoi obviously didn't come to the bathroom, but to make a phone call to get angry. After Gluo came in, Dangoi's voice was still very loud, and he was obviously very angry. Gluo didn't expect that he would suddenly hear such interesting news. He pretended to go through the process and left the bathroom before Dangoi hung up the phone. If Dangoi's news is accurate, there are 3 points that can be confirmed. First, the number of invitations to the auction is wrong. There are too many people coming, and someone forged the invitations. Second, those classmates really were collectively blocked, but they should be able to come in soon and start their own performances. The third and most important point is that the auction items that were not originally on display at the auction will now be on display for 3 hours before the auction begins. Gluo carefully speculated on the secrets behind the news and felt more and more uneasy. Now it seems that the news that there are holy relics at the auction has been completely spread. This shows that many people present today are evolvers, and they are hiding themselves, looking for opportunities and opportunities. This is simply a dark forest. GLUO didn't care about these things before, but now he thinks about it carefully, and his whole body is covered with goosebumps. Everyone around, even the waiter, can be counted. Each of them may be an evolver with a hidden identity. They hold guns and hide in the dark. The branches of leaves block them. Once someone is exposed, the result will definitely be shot. Hey. Sorry. GLUO was thinking about getting out, and when he didn't pay attention, he bumped into someone. The person seemed to have something to do, and walked in a hurry. He didn't even say anything and just left. This person is really brainless. GLUO was still laughing at first. This person ran so fast that he didn't even have eyes. No clue, no clue, no clue. GLUO took a few steps forward before he suddenly realized what was happening. He turned around and found that the man had disappeared in just 2 or 3 seconds. GLUO was an evolver after all. Even if he was distracted while walking, his passive perception ability would not allow him to be bumped into. But GLUO didn't even feel the existence of that person just now. I don't know if he is a man or a woman, tall or short, fat or thin, or what he looks like. Obviously, the person just now is an evolver, and his original talent is an extremely strong hiding ability. This is a bit scary. GLUO now finally understood why Suking-han repeatedly told him not to get involved in the matter of the golden cup. It turned out that countless evolvers were watching here. If he was really an ordinary person, if he rashly got involved, he would be courting death. GLUO didn't dare to be arrogant in an instant. He didn't walk around anymore and went straight back to the party hall. After just walking for more than 10 minutes, GLUO found that there were already a lot of people. As soon as he entered the door, probably about 30 or 40 people. GLUO looked around and didn't see any familiar faces, so he had no choice but to walk towards the main table. As a result, after just a few steps, GLUO saw Dangoi and Qiu Chengai pushing to Sang Sang. GLUO thought there was a conflict, but after a careful look, he found that Dangoi wanted Qiu Chengai to go to the main table, and Qiu Chengai was looking like he was reluctant to accept it, and was just standing there to make a scene. Disgusting. GLUO stopped immediately, thinking that he might as well go out and take another turn. It would have been better if GLUO didn't turn around, but he was startled as soon as he turned around, because not far behind him, a very unexpected person was standing there. Yuzi. GLUO certainly knew this girl who didn't like to talk much and didn't know how to talk much. She was a member of Kichuda's team and also belonged to Kyangzi. She was definitely very good at fighting. The question now was, why was she here? Why was she following him? What he wanted to do was discovered by far, and Kichuda sent her to monitor him? No, he hadn't done anything yet, and there was no such direct monitoring. Yuzi, did Kichuda ask you to come? Well, it's a bit chaotic here today, and the captain asked me to protect you. The girl named Yuzi still had no expression on her face, and she spoke without any tone. GLUO could guess with his eyes closed that these were definitely Kichuda's original words. Good guy, I don't know what the charm of Kichuda is. This Yuzi is no longer a little fangirl, but a believer. Whatever Kichuda said, she took it as an imperial decree. Chaotic? Is there danger today? GLUO tried to ask something tentatively, but Yuzi glanced at him and kept her mouth shut, not saying anything. Obviously, she knew everything, but said nothing. Good guy, this firm revolutionary stance is worthy of praise. Yuzi, I came to attend a class reunion today. It's okay, there is no danger. Really? Really? Okay then. Chapter 199, Bodyguard. Yeah. GLUO thought he had convinced Yuzi, so he smiled and nodded, intending to see her off. Who knew that Yuzi had no intention of leaving at all, and just stood there, looking at GLUO. Yuzi, I'm fine, you don't have to protect me. I know, but I have to follow the captain's orders. Yuzi's tone did not change at all. GLUO stared at her for a few seconds, and GLUO finally gave in. Okay. GLUO knew that he would definitely not be able to change Yuzi's mind, so he chose to give up. Because of the eyes around him, GLUO planned to leave the hall first and find a way to deal with Yuzi, the follower. but unexpectedly, Dangoi had already run over before Gluo walked out. Gluo, what's wrong? Is this my sister-in-law? Just follow me. Why are you taking people out? No, this is a friend of mine. Gluo hurriedly waved his hand to wink at Dangoi. Just kidding. The person above, she always carries a gun on her body, and she is allowed to shoot directly. After all, the threat of the evolver is too great, and there is no room for holding back. Oh, I understand. Dangoi pretended to be very understanding, but in fact he didn't understand at all. He just thought that Yuzi had a crush on Gluo, so he kept following Gluo. He didn't expect the inside story to be so explosive. Come on, beautiful girl, take a seat. Dangoi had been through the ups and downs of society after all, and the situation was very round. When Yuzi saw that she could follow Gluo, she naturally didn't refute and sat directly at the main table. Gluo sat next to Yuzi and felt uncomfortable all over. What's going on? When did Kichudi see him? How come he didn't know? Where did Yuzi come from? Why didn't he see her? Yuzi, Kichudi is in the monitoring room. Gluo thought for a long time and finally felt that the biggest possibility was the monitoring room. As an official member, it would be easy for Kichudi to control the hotel. Since Kichudi was looking at the overall situation, it would be understandable to send Yuzi here. Otherwise, she would definitely come here in person. Gluo was very confident about this. Yeah. Yuzi was not good at lying, so she usually tried not to speak, but now, since Gluo had guessed it himself, she would not lie. I understand. Gluo nodded, and his heart could not help but beat heavily. What a joke. The higher-ups were involved, and they surrounded the whole place. What's going on? Could it be that the golden cup is real? Kane's blood-drinking evil cup. The name sounds invincible. It must have been handed over to the country. How could it be sold? Gluo has basically never seen a holy relic so far. Shushan King size should be a holy relic, but it was broken directly at that time. Apart from that, Gluo has no impression. Gluo reached into his pocket, squeezed the glass bottle in his pocket, and became more and more worried. The current situation gave Gluo a very bad feeling. His intuition told Gluo that the golden cup might really be a holy relic. But, it must not be that strong. If it was Kane's blood-drinking evil cup, with the higher-ups there, it would definitely be taken away directly. I believe everyone knows this truth, so why are there so many evolvers involved now? Are they just random people who come to watch? Wait, is it possible that these evolvers don't know that the higher-ups are involved? It is very likely that those who are caught in the trap are like this. Yuzi, you have a special identity. If you are discovered, I will be in big trouble. It doesn't matter. The captain and I are both from Zeojing. No one knows us here. Yuzi didn't expect Gluo to test her like this and directly reveal the truth. Gluo suddenly remembered that last night, Kichudi was called away by the leader and thrown directly on the street. Obviously, such an important and urgent matter can only be dealt with now. Yuzi, I will go home after dinner. Are you still following me? No, I will go back to the captain after you leave this area. Yuzi really answered whatever she wanted. She would not do any intrigue. She would never say what she couldn't say. What she could say was to answer every question. Oh. Gluo didn't show a very meticulous attitude, but in fact, he was already very happy in his heart. If Gluo is really being watched by Yuzi, then he will be in big trouble. At least he can't get involved in Sukinghan's plan and protect her safety. Gluo, who is this? Introduce her to everyone. Qiyu Chengai was sitting opposite Gluo at this time, with a happy smile on his face, and he had completely forgotten his cowardly look just now. To be honest, from the appearance, Yuzi is the kind of petite and lovely type. As an evolver, her skin is surprisingly good, white, and tender, without any flaws, which is very powerful. You know, the three evil arts of plastic surgery, macup, and PS are to cover up flaws, and evolvers gradually become stronger and erase these flaws. At the very least, the evolvers are all good looking. Her name is Yuzi, my friend. Gluo was reluctant to pay attention to Qiyu Chengai, but after all, He was introducing Yeezy, and if he didn't introduce her well, it would be disrespectful to Yeezy. Hello, beautiful lady. My name is Qiyu Chengai. GLUO's junior high school classmate Qiyu Chengai stood up, as if he could show off, and stretched out his hand, to shake hands with Yeezy. As a successful person who has done well, Qiyu Chengai is still quite jealous of GLUO. A person who has accomplished nothing, and dares not even attend a class reunion has such a beautiful girlfriend. Therefore, Qiyu Chengai wants to show his charm, at least to lower GLUO's score in Yeezy's heart. No matter how to compare, it is obvious that he is much better. However, the situation is very embarrassing. Yeezy sat there, and she didn't see Qiyu Chengai, nor did she mean to shake hands with him, like an exquisite doll. Okay Qiyu Chengai, stop showing off, sit down quickly. Dangoi saw that the situation was not right, and immediately made peace. Qiyu Chengai's face was not very good, and he sat back on the chair. The other few people didn't say anything, but they must have their own opinions in their hearts. Thinking of this, Qiyu Chengai's face became even uglier. Just when everyone thought that the matter was over, Qiyu Chengai's setback was just a joke and passed. However, Yeezy, who had been ignoring Qiyu Chengai, suddenly spoke. Your name is Qiyu Chengai, right? Do you want to take revenge on GLUO? I advise you not to. Yeezy's voice was emotionless. She was just stating the facts, but it sounded too harsh to others. You advised me not to. Why should I listen to you? I want to take revenge on him. What's wrong? Is it not okay? Qiyu Chengai was just angry and said something impulsive. He didn't really mean anything, but he didn't expect that he would fall before he could even finish pretending. Chapter 200, all in the planning. Because, the next moment, the muzzle of the gun was pointed at him. The girl named Yeezy was still sitting on the chair, her eyes looking at the water in the cup, like a primary school student who was seriously distracted. What do you want to do? Qiyu Chengai was frightened by the muzzle of the gun in front of him. In peacetime, who has ever seen a real gun? No one dared to be sure whether this girl was joking or not. In any case, the situation in front of him was really too scary. Yeezy, stop it, put the toy gun back. GLUO's smile was a little stiff. He stretched out his hand to press down the gun in Yeezy's hand, let her turn off the safety, and put it away again. What a joke. Is this how you, the 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau, do things? People just said a few harsh words, and you took out the gun directly and aimed at people's heads. You are too harsh. I'm just following the captain's order to eliminate potential dangers for you. Yeezy seemed a little unhappy because GLUO stopped her. When GLUO saw this situation, he knew that he couldn't stay any longer, so he and Dangoi apologized and pulled Yeezy out of the hall. Of course, GLUO pulled his arm, but Yeezy didn't care about that. She followed behind GLUO, looking a little sorry. What was a pity? Was it a pity that he didn't shoot anyone to death? Or was it a pity that Qiyu Chengai didn't see how powerful she was? GLUO and Yeezy did come out, but GLUO looked around and didn't know what to do for a moment. Anyway, the golden cup would be displayed for 3 hours before the auction, and GLUO didn't have to worry about Dangoi, so he just left. But the problem now was that there was less than an hour left before the golden cup was displayed. Where could he go with a follower? What was even more annoying was that because Yeezy was there, GLUO couldn't contact Tang Ruoxi and the others. GLUO didn't have much idea about the traffic jam outside. Tang Ruoxi, Kyo Junian, Zhu Yi, and Zhu Yi's girlfriend Yuan Wan, the 4 great kings of the World Rescue Association, were all dispatched. They patrolled near the hotel in 4 directions, exploring the terrain and the situation, while sending useful information to GLUO. For this reason, GLUO deliberately set the message to silent, but at this time, Yeezy, a capable general of the 19th Bureau of the National Security Bureau, was next to him, and he didn't even dare to take out his mobile phone to check the message. Trouble. Yeezy, are you hungry? GLUO hesitated for a long time, and finally decided to take Yeezy to eat something. Although this move may seem ordinary, it will never go wrong. Not bad. Yeezy stood half a step behind GLUO, his eyes wandering around the people around him, as if judging the threat they posed to GLUO. This bodyguard is really too dedicated. GLUO could hardly imagine what happened between Yeezy and Kichudi. She was so obedient, and as long as she was given a good task, she would complete it with all her heart and soul. Okay, let's go eat something. GLUO was not hungry at all, but it would be even more uncomfortable if he took Yeezy around. Not to mention, GLUO suspected that Kichudi was observing the entire building from the surveillance. If she came over again, things would be annoying. Because he was already in the hotel, GLUO didn't need to wander around. He was led by the waiter to the dining area. However, what GLUO didn't expect was that the waiter didn't take him to the hotel lobby, but directly into a luxurious private room. It was obviously just a private room for dining, but the area was close to 3 bedrooms and 1 living room, and there were even rockery and flowing water inside. The room was lit with incense, and the smell was very good. This guy is too particular. Waiter, I didn't book a private room. GLUO now felt that he could afford to eat here, but the situation in front of him made GLUO feel that he was going to be slaughtered. He didn't want to give money to Dangoye's family. It's okay to have a simple meal, but it's painful to have a big meal here. This kind of private room has a minimum consumption, and GLUO doesn't want 2 people to come and pretend to be big heads. Sir, it's okay, this room has been booked, and someone specifically asked me to invite you here. Who? GLUO turned his head and glanced at Yeezy, indicating whether she knew what was going on, but Yeezy had already sat at the table and started flipping through the menu. GLUO, don't worry about this, let's order the dishes first. The National Security Bureau 19 has never been ripped off when eating. Yeezy doesn't seem to like to talk much, but no one can see that she is also a violent person. She will step into the problem that can be solved directly and finally beat it out directly. Obviously, she was stopped by GLUO when she pointed a gun at Qiyu Chengai just now. She felt that her power was not shown, and now she is gathering her energy. Okay, as long as you are happy. GLUO looked at Yeezy's indifferent expression and knew that she was not pretending to be awesome, but really awesome. Just kidding. The captain of the 17th team of the National Security Bureau 19th assault is here. Although Yeezy didn't show it, she was so quiet, there must be other team members around Kichudi. At least 3 evolvers, the number of plainclothes special police. GLUO estimated that there were at least 100 people. The momentum of the waiters who came all the way over did not look like they came out of the kitchen at all, but looked like they had just left the battlefield. Kichudi, what is she doing? Such obvious security measures, who is she showing it to? Or, she wanted to use a tight security to make everyone more convinced of the authenticity of the Golden Cup. Things are getting weirder and weirder. GLUO sat on the chair and watched Yeezy order the dishes, still thinking about the overall situation. What is certain is that when the National Security Bureau 19 got involved, Dangoye's family's industry was completely at the mercy of Kichudi. In this way, the exhibition of the Golden Cup was also arranged by Kichudi. But, why did she do that? To prove to everyone that the Golden Cup is fake. Because it is not a holy relic, it only needs the normal auction process, and the evolvers can just think of it as a wasted trip. With so many security guards around, they can't do anything bad. In this way, it seems to make sense. But, is it really that simple? GLUO, what are you thinking about? Eat. Oh. GLUO was called by Yeezy and came back to his senses. When he looked up, he was directly shocked. My goodness, how much can Yeezy eat? She ordered a whole table of dishes. And just by looking at the presentation, you can tell that they are extremely expensive. She is going to rip GLUO off. Don't look at me. I didn't order these dishes. I ordered. Here. Yeezy pointed at the 2 plates of home-cooked dishes in front of her with her chopsticks and shrugged her shoulders. GLUO turned around and looked at the waiter who brought the dishes. His expression became serious. Who arranged all this? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.